how we can tell fact from fiction, lies even?
Yes, that is very much with us at the moment. It's since really about 30 years ago, with the coming of the internet and Twitter and social media and so on, that has made truth harder to grasp, I think, because the authorities we used to turn to are now either not used at all, like dictionaries and encyclopedias, or mocked as being purveyors of something that's patriarchal, it's old-fashioned, it's imperialist, it's this, it's that, it's Marxist, it's whatever. So what do you know? Who do we believe? That's difficult. That's difficult for people to get. It's difficult for people to tell, it's difficult for people to hear that they've been fooled. People don't like being fooled and don't like being told that they've been fooled because it means that they're fools. Nevertheless, we have been fooled. We are being fooled daily.
We were talking earlier about how much you read as a child. And when you started writing these books, it was a very different time. It was the nascent days of the internet. There was no social media, no algorithms ruling our lives. And perhaps most crucially, kids were still reading. And yet now we've got, a recent study by the National Literacy Trust that says only 1 in 3 children aged 8 to 18 enjoy reading in their free time. And another that suggests a quarter of white working class boys don't read outside school. It's a stupid question to ask an author, does it worry you? But how shocked are you by that, and what can we do about it?
I'm not surprised, I'm not shocked, I'm just saddened, really. But the reason people don't read is that they haven't been surrounded by other people who read. The best way to become a reader is to be born into a family of readers. It's this childhood thing, it's a young childhood business. Every child needs someone to bring them up, who will sit them on their lap and do the nursery rhymes and all that sort of stuff, tell them stories, read them stories, share books, looking at the pictures. Every child needs that. It's the most powerful, most important, most profound and fundamental thing. And that's what they're not getting because people are born into families who don't have the book reading habit, who haven't any books themselves, who don't know where the might is, and the library might probably been closed anyway, and teachers who haven't got the time to do that sort of thing.
But I think there'll be parents listening to this thinking, I've done all that, my child did read, but as soon as they got a phone, and I'm speaking from experience, the power of the phone is so strong, and the fights that you have to fight to get off the phone, the algorithm is so strong, they lose that love of reading, or at least they seem to.
Yeah, we've invented a lot of things whose consequences we haven't foreseen or worked out, and that's certainly one of them, the phone. I hate it. I've got a mobile phone, but I only use it for me to make phone calls to other people, not for them to phone me. And I see the power of it when you see kids at bus stops going diddly, diddly, diddly. When you see those pictures of children in Thailand or whatever sitting by the side of the road doing this. What do we do about it? I don't know. I don't know. I only do the thing I know how to do, which is telling stories. That works for the people who read them. But the only way to make people want to read stories is to give them good stories and make them available. A library, a good library in schools, properly stacked and properly functioning with a knowledgeable librarian, that'll work enormously.
What do you hope your legacy is as you come to this sort of milestone moment? I'm sure there's more to come, but do you ever think about legacy?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think if my books are still around in 100 years' time, I'll be very pleased. And I hope people will continue to read them and enjoy them and think about what I'm saying in them. Not take a message from it or a lesson from it, but just see the world a little differently.
Thank you for listening to the interview from the BBC World Service. You'll find more in-depth conversations on the interview wherever you get your BBC podcasts, including episodes with UN Deputy Secretary-General Amina Mohammed, tennis icon Martina Navratilova, and political economist Francis Fukuyama. Until the next time, bye for now. From the BBC, that was The Interview. I'm Saroja Coelho. CBC News is next.
Well, good morning, Manitoba. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM in Winnipeg, and everywhere on the CBC Listen app. We're also streaming on CBC Manitoba's YouTube channel. I'm Marjorie Dowhouse in for Marcy Marcusa this morning. Right now in Winnipeg, well, we are under, it's dark outside. That time change made a huge difference. Partly cloudy right now, 1 degree on our way to a high of 9. But first, let's check in with Heather Wells and a look at your morning headlines. Good morning, Heather.
Good morning. Well, some federal government workers are on edge today as the federal budget is about to drop. Ottawa has signaled civil service reductions are on the horizon. Looming cuts come, though, as federal unions are in bargaining. Adam King, assistant professor of labor studies at the University of Manitoba, says the two largest unions have job security protections in their collective agreements, and he says that could complicate any spending reduction plans. Preliminary numbers from Manitoba's chief medical examiner show fewer drug-related deaths in the first 6 months of this year compared to the same time period in recent years. The examiner's office says the short-term decline is encouraging, but they remain optimistic. Meanwhile, leaders in the harm reduction community say more services are needed. We'll hear more in our next local newscast coming up at 6:30.
Thank you very much, Heather.
Thank you.
Heather Wells there with your CBC local news headlines from the CBC Manitoba News Centre. So at 5:58 right now, we're at 1 degree here in Winnipeg. It is partly cloudy. We're expecting to have a mostly cloudy sky today here in Winnipeg with some sunny breaks. Above seasonal temperatures continue. For this time of year, we're only looking at highs. We should be at highs around 2 degrees, but we're looking at a high of 9 degrees today, dropping below the freezing mark overnight. A low of -1 under a partly cloudy sky, and then the above seasonal temperatures continue again tomorrow. Sunshine and 6 degrees here in Winnipeg. We're going to have more on your forecast with Abby Adeyemi coming up on the show. Just a reminder, too, that if you have a traffic tip for us, nothing right now to report, give us a call on the commuter line 204-788-3093. Again, you're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM in Winnipeg, and everywhere on the CBC Listen app. Stay with us. World Report is next.
Today on Q.
I'm Talia Schlanger in for Tom Power. The Canadian artist Rochelle Jordan is known for pushing the boundaries in dance music. Her new album, Through the Wall, is her most critically acclaimed yet. She'll tell you about that new record and how she continues to carve out her own lane in the industry.
Q. This morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Former U.S. President Dick Cheney has died. A statement from his family says the 84-year-old died last night due to complications from pneumonia and cardiac and vascular disease. The Republican politician served as vice president under George W. Bush for 2 terms and is seen as one of the most influential people to ever hold the position. Cheney saw the country through its war on terror following 9/11, but drew harsh criticism for his push to invade Iraq in search of weapons of mass destruction, weapons which were never found. In recent years, Cheney has distanced himself from the Republican Party. He was critical of U.S. President Donald Trump, even going so far as to endorse Democratic candidate Kamala Harris for president during last year's election. It is budget day in Canada, and Prime Minister Mark Carney is signaling it will come with big investments and big cuts. He says it is all aimed at transforming the Canadian economy and relying less on the United States. Let's bring in Janice McGregor from our Parliamentary Bureau. And Janice, Carney's mantra has been spend less to invest more. Today, we find out what that means.
Marcia, when François-Philippe Champagne told reporters yesterday that this budget would have no surprises, he must have been referring to the big ticket, as he's deemed them, generational investments that we've been hearing about for months. Because this finance minister has been sitting on a number of secrets, including exactly what he decided after writing his cabinet colleagues last summer and telling them to find $25 billion in spending reductions, way more than the Liberals had campaigned on. A senior Canadian official tells CBC News that tens of billions worth of programming and expenditure cuts threats have been identified. Mark Carney may have started off the year talking about trimming the bureaucracy through attrition, but that message has migrated in recent weeks as the scale of these spending reductions took shape. Among the programs that are cancelled or expiring, a Justin Trudeau legacy item, the promise to plant 2 billion trees by 2031. This budget will have a climate strategy, but it's not going to feature that anymore. The Prime Minister signalled in his pre-budget speech 2 weeks ago that some things the Liberals have been doing, they campaigned on, perhaps still want to do, aren't possible now. So as we get our hands on this budget, we're going to check for what campaign promises have to be set aside, if not outright abandoned.
Could all of this be leading to a change in Canadian tax rates?
The Prime Minister has signalled an interest in tax reform to improve Canada's competitiveness, but we don't know what that means. Corporate tax changes, more write-offs perhaps for startups or other strategic industries. Will some of this dovetail with climate strategy? In an era of households stressing over affordability, personal or even consumption tax increases have fallen out of political fashion. Any kind of tax increase would be waving a red cape in the face of this opposition Conservative Party in particular. But governments have to pay their bills somehow. And if economic forecasts remained iffy, the only other alternative is a lot more red ink.
Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa. Canada is pushing back on Stellantis' decision to move jobs to the U.S. The government says it's starting a process to try to get some taxpayer money back and save jobs. Samantha Craigs has more.
If you invest in Canada, if you create good jobs here, our government will be your strongest partner. But if you make promises and then walk away, you will be held accountable.
Melanie Joly, Canada's industry minister, says Ottawa is starting a dispute resolution process to get back some of the money it's pledged to Stellantis. This all started last month. That's when the automaker said it would move production of the Jeep Compass to Illinois. The Compass was supposed to be built in Brampton, a plant where thousands of workers are laid off. Joly says that move violates contracts that Stellantis signed to get government money. Both Ottawa and Ontario pledged money to help Stellantis retool plants in Brampton and Windsor, and $15 billion to build an EV plant in Windsor. Joly said those contracts guaranteed Canadian jobs, but Conservative MP Raquel Dancho says Joly hasn't been clear enough about that.
From our estimation and a historic investment that your government has made, surely there should be an explicit Canada-wide jobs guarantee. But we're splitting hairs here. You're kind of being quite evasive of the numbers, whether there's a real guarantee. It should be explicit if you're going to give a historic amount of taxpayer funding.
Stellantis, meanwhile, says the Brampton plant is only paused and no jobs have been lost. It also says it'll keep working with Ottawa to make sure the Canadian auto production sector is sustainable. Samantha Craig, CBC News, Windsor.
Israel's former chief military advocate general is in police custody. Yifat Tomer Yerushalmi's detention has been extended after an hours-long search by Israeli police. She's being held on suspicion of obstructing justice and breach of trust. The charges relate to a video that allegedly shows the abuse of a Palestinian detainee. The CBC's Crystal Gomansing has more from Jerusalem and a warning. Some of the details are disturbing.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said enormous damage has been done to the state, that the incident in Sde Taiman could be the most severe information blow in Israel's existence. Netanyahu's comments Sunday came after Yifat Tomer Yerushalmi, Israel's chief military advocate general, quit her job. In her resignation letter Friday, she said she authorized the release of a video from inside the military base and detention camp. The security camera footage from 2024 showed soldiers taking a prisoner aside and then crowding around while blocking visibility of their actions with riot shields. The prisoner was allegedly beaten and stabbed in the rectum with a sharp object. 5 reservists were charged with aggravated abuse and causing serious bodily harm to the detainee. They've denied the charges and have not been named. A criminal investigation into the leak began last week, leading to Tomer Yerushalmi's resignation. Israel's defense minister condemned her actions and accused her of spreading a blood libel against IDF troops. Her arrest has deepened a growing divide inside Israel between the far-right government that accuses her of damaging Israel's reputation on the global stage and those who feel the military needs to be held accountable for any possible war crimes. Crystal Gamansing, CBC News, Jerusalem.
Yukoners chose to move on from the status quo. They chose a new path. They chose change.
Yukon's Premier-elect Curry Dixon after a big win last night. His Yukon party was handed a majority by voters in yesterday's election and is expected to win 14 of the territory's 21 ridings. The Yukon NDP will become the official opposition. Leader Kate White says she plans to hold the incoming government accountable as residents continue to struggle with affordability and access to health care. After nearly a decade of rule, the Yukon Liberals won just one seat in the Legislative Assembly. Some voters in the U.S. will go to the polls today in the first election day since U.S. President Donald Trump returned to the White House. New York City votes for a new mayor. New Jersey and Virginia residents will choose a new governor. And California voters will decide whether to adopt Proposition 50. The redistricting plan is expected to set the stage for next year's midterms. Steve Futterman has more.
Even though it's being voted on today, the focus of Prop 50 is next year, specifically next year's U.S. elections for the House of Representatives. Polls give Democrats a good chance to win the House in 2026. If that happens, Donald Trump's legislative agenda would likely come to a halt, leading Trump earlier this year to find ways to hold on to the House.
We have an opportunity in Texas to pick up 5 seats. We are entitled to 5 more seats.
Trump came up with a plan to redraw congressional maps in Republican-friendly states, and in Texas, Republicans went along. They redrew the maps to try to turn Democratic seats into Republican seats. Traditionally, maps are redrawn every 10 years after the U.S. Census. The next time is in 2030. Democrats say Prop 50 is designed to counter what Trump and Republicans are doing now. California Governor Gavin Newsom.
I know they say don't mess with Texas. Well, don't mess with the great Golden State.
Democrats here say normally they would be against a clearly partisan tactic like this, but they insist they can't stand back and let Trump do it in Texas and in other states. Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren.
We need to be able to win next year, and we're not going to be able to do that if we allow President Trump to rig the entire thing.
Prop 50 is designed to have a time limit. After the 2030 elections, the process would go back to its current nonpartisan method. Steve Futterman, CBC News, Los Angeles.
And one of the most read stories at CBCNews.ca about Dick Cheney. The powerful and polarizing U.S. Vice President of George W. Bush is dead. He was 84 years old. More on that at CBCNews.ca. I'm Marcia Young. That is World Report.
I'm in Winnipeg on the CBC Listen app and streaming on CBC Manitoba's YouTube channel. I'm Marjorie Dowhouse in for Marcy Marcusa this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Coming up on this hour of the show, well, the big story today, yes, the federal budget. We're going to head to Ottawa and check in with Ryan Tamilty, a political reporter with the Toronto Star. He'll be looking ahead to the tabling of the Prime Minister's first federal budget that's coming up after 6:30. Also, the U.S. top court is hearing a case tomorrow challenging President Donald Trump's signature tariff policy, which is shaking up the global trade system. We're going to find out more coming up at around 6:20. But first up, a local author will join us to give us the rundown of her new book following a young girl grappling with an unplanned pregnancy. Stay tuned for that. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1. It is 6:11 now, and let's check in now with Heather Wells and a look at your morning headlines. Good morning, Heather.
Good morning. Well, some federal government workers are on edge as the federal budget, as you mentioned, drops this afternoon. Ottawa signaling civil service reductions are on the horizon, and these looming cuts come, though, as federal unions are in bargaining. Adam King at the University of Manitoba says the two biggest unions have job security protections in their collective agreements, and that, he says, could complicate the federal government's reduction plans. Preliminary numbers from Manitoba's chief medical examiner show fewer drug-related deaths in the first 6 months of this year compared to the same time in the last recent years. The examiner's office says the short-term decline is encouraging but remains cautious. Leaders in Manitoba's harm reduction community say more services are needed, and we'll hear more about that in our next local news coming up at 6:30.
Thank you very much, Heather. Heather Wells there with your morning headlines. Well, let's say good morning to our wonderful crew behind the glass today. Our show director is May McKillop. Darren Morash is running our YouTube feed here at CBC Manitoba. And Abby Adiyemi, of course, our tech, but also keeping an eye on the forecast. And Abby, the above seasonal temperatures continue. It's hard to believe that it is November with the temperatures we're seeing lately.
It is hard to believe, for me to still spend time at the park this time of the year and not too much of layers. I'm taking it all in before the white stuff settles in.
Mm-hmm.
But and that continues. That calm conditions still continues through today. We're looking at a cloudy Tuesday, actually. Mild fall temperatures. A few spots would see cooler temperatures in the northern parts of the province, but the south is going to stay warmer than normal under a mix of sunny conditions, and we'll see some clouds, and maybe up north we might see a bit of a sunny break in between. But Winnipeg right now, we're hovering between 0 and 1, depending on where you are in the city. But the Fox is reading 0 at this time, and at the airport we're saying 0 there. The Fox we're saying 1 degree right now. Across board, we're looking at similar conditions. We'll hold on to mostly cloudy conditions through the day. Light breeze, highs around 9 degrees, and then tonight some clear skies. Across board, 0 to 3 from Pembina Valley region all the way through to Portage, Brandon, Dauphin. That's what we're seeing right now, expecting a mix of, some cloudy conditions and a few sunny breaks in those regions. While up north, most of the regions staying close to the freezing mark, but we should see highs reaching about 4 and 5 degrees in that part of the province. In the Hudson Bay coast, we're looking at a temperature around 1 degree right now, and we're still getting those gusty winds there in the Churchill region. So brace for that. You see your temperatures dropped about -4 later this evening. So it's mild and mostly cloudy in the south and cooler, breezy as you travel up north. Winnipeg right now, we're looking at 1 and 0, depending on where you are.
All right. Thank you very much, Abby.
Thank you.
Abby Adiyemi there with a look at your current conditions and your forecast here in Manitoba. So far, no updates, no calls regarding traffic out there. But if you have a tip of what is maybe affecting your commute this morning, give us a call. Here's the number, 204-788-3093. Coming up now to 6:15, Winnipeg author Harriet Zaidman has a new book. It is titled What Friends Are For, and follows a young girl coping with an unplanned pregnancy after protesting outside of an abortion clinic herself with family and close friends. She's here now in studio to talk about the book. Good morning. Welcome to the show, Harriet.
Thank you very much, Marjorie.
So I gave a little bit of a preview there of what to expect and what Friends Are For, but tell us a little bit more of what readers can expect in the book.
Well, I set the book in 1983 when Dr. Henry Morgentaler established an abortion clinic here in Winnipeg on Corridon Avenue. And I did that because I wanted to write the book because people have forgotten what the situation was for women's rights before the laws were struck down in 1988 and replaced with medical guidelines only. Before that, you had to have permission from your doctor and a hospital committee of 3 doctors in order to have an abortion if you had an unplanned pregnancy. So I've created a situation where a girl is convinced that by her mom and her friend that the clinic is immoral, is wrong, and but then suddenly she's assaulted, and now what does she do? Because everything she's invested in is in this movement.
Mm-hmm. As you mentioned there, I mean, Dr. Morgentaler is a real person.
Yes.
This was a real clinic. How did you go about researching what you needed, to write this book?
Well, aside from a huge amount of reading, I sought out people who worked at the clinic, and I talked to a huge number of people, and it's interesting. The more I talked about it, the more I encountered people who had some relationship with it, who either lived near there or had some person who was involved in it or somehow was connected to that movement. And the other interesting thing is that when I talked to people about it, then people told me stories about their abortions, their mother's abortions. Like, this is an issue in women's health. There have always been pregnancies that women cannot have or do not want to have unplanned. 50% of pregnancies are unplanned, and so a portion of them people can't say, okay, well, I'll just accept it. And it's just a constant issue in society, and criminalizing it, as was done over the 19th and 20th century, hasn't changed the social need for women to decide that they can't have this pregnancy.
Mm-hmm. So the characters in your book, were they inspired by the people that you spoke with, or are they based on real people? Just because, I mean, this is based on, as you talked about, Dr. Morgentaler and the clinic.
Well, it's based on placing a person in this situation and what do you do. And then, as I thought about it and as I researched it, it sort of became a composite character. But yes, it's based on people in various different ways. And it's based on people who were in the anti-abortion movement, and the people who worked at these clinics have told me that people who in the anti-abortion community came to them to have abortions as well, because they had pregnancies that they couldn't tolerate, couldn't go forward with. And so that was, pretty interesting that they would come silently, secretly to these clinics, and but they were afraid of losing their community. They were afraid of being ostracized, and so they couldn't tell their friends and family.
Harriet, the timing of this book, why is now the right time for this book?
Well, because of what's happening in the U.S. Being pregnant is being criminalized, and women are losing their rights. Women are being viewed as citizens that need to be controlled, and it's having disastrous results. You've had some young women die because they've been denied care. You're going to have an underground network again of backroom butchers, which is the term that is descriptive of people who do illegal abortions. That's going to occur again. It's going to damage women's reproductive health, and it has already cost lives.
You have a small segment of the book that you have prepared to read. What have you prepared?
Okay, I'll just set this up. Lisa is my character. She's just confided in her friend Jenny as they're driving somewhere that she is pregnant. And Jenny stops the car. The breeze outside the car had picked up. A clear plastic bag tumbled across the hood on its endless journey. Jenny reached into her jeans, pulled out a tissue, and blew her nose. It was meant to be, Lisa. Everything happens for a reason. I'm sure of that. Lisa couldn't believe what she was hearing. What are you talking about? I thought we were going to go out together, to like each other. I thought he liked me. I didn't ask to get pregnant. Jenny shook her head back and forth, tears still rolling. That's what I've learned, that we're here for a reason, that our lives aren't our own. I'm sure it's true. A slight smile grew on the corners of her mouth as she gazed out the windshield. I'll be like an auntie, but I'll be a mother. I don't want to. Lisa turned, her eyes flashing. You wouldn't. No. Lisa fought to get the words out. More tears trickled down her cheeks. I was hoping it might go away. I thought that maybe it wouldn't stick. What am I going to do? She wrapped her arms around herself and sobbed. I'm a kid, Jenny. I don't want to have a baby. She covered her face with her hands and wept until she ran out of tears.
Thank you for reading that segment from your book, Harriet. What do you want people to talk about? What kind of conversations are you hoping will be sparked as a result of the book?
Oh, I'm hoping that people will sort of learn about or research what happened to women before the laws were struck down. I hope that people will see women as equal citizens capable of making their own decisions about their own bodies. And above all, I hope that people will realize that this is a decision that a woman can make on her own. And people who do not want to follow that route of ending an unwanted pregnancy or a dangerous pregnancy, whatever it is, for whatever reason, should follow their own conscience, which is to perhaps go through with the pregnancy. And that involves, some people invoke religious reasons why they shouldn't, and that should be reasons for them alone. And, I in reading this, reading about the topic, I came across a book written by the former Attorney General of Canada, the late Mark McGuigan, who was a practicing Catholic and personally opposed to the idea of having an abortion. But he said Christians are called upon to be Democrats as well as to be faithful to the Christian moral principles and respectful of those of others, because it's not something you can impose upon another person because it's their life.
Harriet, I really do appreciate you coming in today and joining us live in studio. Thank you so much for being here this morning.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Harriet Zaidman is the author of What Friends Are For. She'll be launching the novel on Thursday, November 20th at McNally Robinson.
North of North is in fashion, literally. CBC and the WAG are partnering to present Crafted on the Catwalk November 4th, a fashion show featuring cast members of the breakout comedy displaying designer clothes from Manitoba and the North. Then shop for fine handmade goods at Crafted Show and Sale November 7th to 9th. Visit cbc.ca/Manitoba/community for more, including an exclusive North of North screening and meet and greet.
6:23 now. Well, U.S. President Donald Trump's tariff policy has shaken up the international trade system, and Canada is only one of many countries trying to recalibrate their economies as a result. This week, though, the U.S. Supreme Court is hearing a challenge from business groups to the tariff policy, and many are watching closely to see how the bench rules. For more, we're joined by Paul Waldman. He's a columnist for MSNBC and joins us now via Zoom. Good morning. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Good morning.
How important is this hearing over tariffs in the Supreme Court? What's at stake here?
It's incredibly important. This is really the centerpiece of Donald Trump's entire economic policy. And it's never really been settled before whether or not the president actually has the power to unilaterally impose tariffs in the way that Trump has. He's done it more than any president has before. And the Constitution says that it is Congress's power to levy taxes and duties. But the administration claims that a law that was passed in 1977 gives Trump emergency powers. If he decides that there's an emergency, that then he can then impose whatever tariffs he wants. And so we don't really know how this is going to turn out because as you said, there are business groups that are raising this challenge. There's a group of small businesses that are the actual plaintiffs in the case. They're being backed up, and their legal fees are being paid by some conservative think tanks that are kind of laissez-faire economics. You have the Chamber of Commerce, the largest business group in the country that is supporting the plaintiffs. And on the other side, you have President Trump and a lot of his allies. So it isn't kind of a clear conservative liberal break. And even though there's a 6-3 conservative majority on the court, we really won't know until we hear oral arguments to start to get a sense of how those justices are actually coming down on this question and whether or not they're going to decide that the president can kind of seize this power for himself, or whether they'll just say the Constitution says it's Congress that does the taxing and therefore you can't do this.
Paul, what kind of timeline are we looking at here until a decision is made?
Well, the oral arguments are today. They can go as kind of as slowly, as quickly as they want. Oftentimes, the Supreme Court will wait until the end of its term, which is next summer, to issue all the big decisions that it heard over the course of that year. But in this case, I think they're probably going to put out a ruling a little bit sooner because, this is something that's ongoing. He's imposing new tariffs almost every day, as people in Canada know very well. So they may get something out pretty quickly, which could mean a month or 2 months or something like that. And we'll see how that resolves the question.
What are analysts here weighing about the possible outcome, Paul?
Well, it's really, really uncertain. No one really knows because we haven't had the court weigh in yet on this tariff question. They've been extremely gracious toward Trump in all of the different kinds of ways that he has attempted to enhance the power of the presidency, up to and including giving him immunity to commit crimes when he's in office. But this is kind of a novel question. And so it's possible that it may be a case where they say, all right, well, we're going to pull back on him a little bit because of whatever views they have about trade or the powers of the presidency, et cetera. I don't think anybody really knows how they're going to rule. And so this is, most cases that come before the court, we really know just because of ideology where they're going to come down. And the conservatives get almost everything they want out of the Supreme Court. But this is one where, since conservatives themselves are divided and there's a lot of free traders within the Republican Party, it's really up in the air at this point. We have no idea.
How might President Trump get around a ruling here against the tariffs?
Well, it's hard to believe that if they rule against him that he's not going to find some way around it. I mean, he has an almost religious faith in the power of tariffs. It's sometimes, the things that he says are hard to believe, that, if we impose tariffs, then it's just going to bring us to economic nirvana. But he really does seem to believe it. And he also, I think, loves the fact that it's a place where he is exercising power unilaterally, that he can wake up in the morning, decide that he doesn't like something Canada did, and then impose a bunch of tariffs, and nobody can stop him. So it seems unlikely that if he loses in the court, he'll just say, well, I lost. I guess I have to remake my entire economic policy. But a lot of the question will hinge on what the ruling actually says. Sometimes the Supreme Court can close one door and open another. In their ruling, they may say that, well, the president can do it, but only under these circumstances. They might open it up a crack, and he'll take any opening he can get, I think. So the real question is, what does that ruling actually say? If it's really emphatic and it just says absolutely not, the power lies with Congress alone, then he's going to have to come up with some other economic policy. But if they, provide some way around it, then he will take that opportunity.
Paul, I want to move on now to other news. The government shutdown. Describe to us how that's affecting Americans right now.
It's starting to really bite. The government has been shut down, I think, for 36 days. And the big question right now is food stamps. There are 42 million Americans who get food stamps. And those payments were cut off as of November 1st. Now the Trump administration is saying that they can release some partial payments, but it's going to take a while based on using emergency funding. So this is something that is really going to be causing widespread hunger. You've also got hundreds of thousands of federal workers who are not getting paid. You have federal offices that are closed and national parks that are closing and things like that. So it's really something that people are starting to feel. And both sides are under lots of political pressure. Right now in Congress, they're at an impasse. The Republicans have always felt that they had the upper hand because they, as kind of the anti-government party, don't really care much if food stamps are cut off or if, people can't get the services that they have been getting. But on the other hand, the polls show pretty clearly that Republicans are the ones being blamed for the shutdown. And so now I think both sides are feeling like they have to come to some kind of an agreement, and they've got to do it pretty quickly. But the substance of what has been dividing them over subsidies for health insurance, that is something that they have not been able to resolve. And Republicans say they won't move. Democrats say they won't allow a vote on the budget to go through unless they get so those subsidies to be renewed. And so one side or the other is really going to have to give in. And that's where we're at right now.
And finally, we have about 30 seconds left here, Paul, but I want to get to you about this because this is a big deal. New Yorkers head to the polls today to elect a new mayor. Tell us a little bit about the elections in New York City.
Yeah, it's been a crazy race. The current mayor, Eric Adams, was beset by corruption scandals. He dropped out. Then you have the former governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, who also left office in scandal. And it looks like the person who's going to win is Zohran Mamdani, who's this incredibly exciting young candidate. He's only 34, and he is charismatic and adept at social media. And a lot of Democrats think that he is the kind of person they need more of. Regardless of whether you agree with his ideology, he's quite far to the left, but he's really getting people excited in a way that people haven't seen in a long time. So that's what's brought a lot of the attention to this race.
Paul, thank you so much. A lot to talk about. Thank you for joining us on the show this morning.
My pleasure. Thanks a lot.
Paul Waldman is a columnist for MSNBC. Stay with us. Your CBC Local News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:31, it is 1 degree. It's a little frosty this morning, but we will warm up again, warmer than seasonal, a high today of 9. Mostly cloudy and not as much wind today. The Liberal government tables its first budget today under Prime Minister Mark Carney.
We will have to make some difficult choices, responsible choices. Federal government spending has grown massively over the last few years. That's not sustainable.
Mark Carney in a Liberal ad hinting spending cuts are on the way. That, along with what the Liberals call generational investments in housing and infrastructure. In recent weeks, the opposition Conservatives, the Bloc and NDP, have all been accusing the Liberals of looking to trigger an election. The House vote on the budget is a confidence vote, which means if it doesn't pass, the Liberal minority would fall and an election would follow. Now, the union for thousands of federal workers in Manitoba is bracing for today's budget. There is concern significant workforce cuts are coming. Last week, Canada's finance minister said the size of the federal workforce wasn't sustainable. The Public Service Alliance of Canada represents about 9,000 of the 13,000 federal public service workers in Manitoba. Marianne Ledoux is the union's executive vice president for the Prairies.
Sometimes people think of public service workers as a bunch of bureaucrats with no face. But when you need them, you expect them to be there. And that is our biggest concern.
Any cuts to the civil service come as unions are in bargaining. The University of Manitoba labor expert, an expert at the U of M, says the timing could plunge Canada into significant labor-related tensions. Now, CBC Radio will broadcast special coverage of the federal budget today. It all begins at 3 Central on CBC Radio 1 and on the CBC Listen app. A spokesperson for Manitoba criminal defense lawyers says the Premier's latest statements about the justice system are like anonymous posts on the internet. Yesterday, Wab Kinew said people convicted of child porn offenses should be buried under prisons and placed at the mercy of other inmates. That in response to a Supreme Court decision about mandatory minimum sentences for certain child porn offenses. Defense lawyer Chris Gamby says this is just the latest concerning comment from the Premier about the justice system.
It would be good for the Premier to have a bit more respect for the rule of law and for the court system.
In October 2024, Wab Kinew claimed he expelled lawyer Mark Wasilyu from the NDP caucus because a legal colleague represented Peter Nygaard. Kinew later apologized to Wasilyu's colleague and defense lawyers in general. Then, last month, the Premier criticized a judge over a bail decision. Some lawyers say recent calls for bail reform in Canada do not address the real problems they see in those courtrooms. Reid Satarik is a Winnipeg defense lawyer. She worries recent calls for change to the bail system would make it even harder to be released for people who are already struggling.
It disadvantages people who have mental health concerns. It disadvantages people who have addictions and people who are homeless or struggling with poverty. And those are people we should be trying to support.
The federal government's recently proposed sweeping changes to Canada's bail framework designed to make it harder for violent and repeat offenders to be released. Preliminary numbers from Manitoba's chief medical examiner show fewer drug-related deaths in the first 6 months of this year compared to the same time period in recent years. The examiner's office says the short-term decline is encouraging, but they remain cautious. Meanwhile, leaders in Manitoba's harm reduction community say more services are needed. Levi Foy at Sunshine House says greater public awareness around harm reduction is a possible factor.
I know in my own family and in my own community, there's a lot more conversations about what does safety look like for folks who are using drugs and what does kind of community safety look like for everybody.
Foy says they want to see more services made available, including a supervised consumption site. Now, Addictions Minister Bernadette Smith says her government still plans to open a supervised consumption site.
We are working towards opening up our first supervised consumption site here in Winnipeg. It is something that, we know is desperately needed.
In September, the NDP government scrapped its plans to open a supervised consumption site at 200 Disraeli following stiff opposition from people living in that area. Smith would not say if a new location has been identified. Former U.S. Vice President Dick Cheney has died. Cheney served alongside Republican President George W. Bush for 2 terms between 2001 and 2009, and for decades was a towering political figure in Washington. Following the attacks of 9/11, Cheney oversaw the country's so-called War on Terror and the invasion of Iraq. In recent years, however, Cheney turned away from the Republican Party and was publicly critical of Donald Trump, who Cheney called, quote, a coward and a threat to the Republic. Dick Cheney was 84 years old. You can hear more about that story and other national and international news coming up on World Report at 7, and you can find more Manitoba news at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you very much, Heather.
Thank you.
Heather Wells with your CBC local news. Are coming up here to 6:37, and you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM in Winnipeg, everywhere on the CBC Listen app, and we are also streaming on CBC Manitoba's YouTube channel. I'm Marjorie Dowhouse, in for Marcy Marcusa this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Well, let's check in with Abby Adeyemi and a look at the forecast. And I know that you were saying that you're just enjoying the walk in the park. It's warm
soaking it all in.
Taking it all in, Abby.
And I didn't get blown away on Sunday and yesterday, so I'm still soaking it all in.
Mm-hmm.
Just enjoying the fall transition. However, we're going to get more like cloudy conditions across board today. We're still going to enjoy those mild fall air in the southern part of the province, but as you travel further north, you're going to see cooler conditions in parts of the northern regions. Winnipeg right now, we're looking at 1 at the Fox, 0 at the airport still, partly cloudy skies. Expect these mainly cloudy conditions to stick with us for most of the day. Just a few sun breaks in between, and then we warm up to 9 degrees later. If you are a stargazer, definitely you want to enjoy some of those, the full moon tonight. We're transitioning into the full moon era already. You should look out for that. You get some clear conditions. However, it's going to be around -1 at that time. Similar conditions we're seeing in the Pembina Valley region at this time. Partly cloudy, light west breeze. We will see some clearing later in the day. However, you deal with the cloudy conditions, you warm up to 9 degrees as well. In the Westman region, we're looking at -3 in Brandon at this time. It is cloudy out there. It stays cool and cloudy today. You warm up near 9 degrees for Brandon. In the Parkland region, tracking it from Dauphin all the way towards Russell, Roblin, we're looking at -3, partly cloudy there. We will see clear conditions later tonight. You warm up to about 8 degrees later, and then you drop to -4 later. But sunshine on its way for tomorrow. Gimli's at -2, partly cloudy now. That's going to be the conditions through the day, and then you warm up to about 8. For the powerfully influenced surrounding communities, we're looking at 1 degree out there. Mostly clear skies. You're getting mild breeze. It's going to be sunny in that part of the province today. High will be around 5 degrees. And then Thompson is clear with -1. Just some brisk conditions there. You will see a mix of sun and clouds later. A slim chance of flurries, highs near 4 degrees. While Churchill, we're looking at 1 degree and cloudy. Strong westerly winds. A slim chance of flurries, and temperatures will fall to -4 for folks around Churchill and the York region. And then I know overnight it's going to be dropping to about -12 in that part of the province. So we're getting into like the real winter mood for Manitoba. Anyway, for now, let's just enjoy the mild condition today as we get to the end of the week. Winnipeg right now, we're looking at 1 degree, and it's partly cloudy out there.
All right. Thank you very much, Abby.
You're welcome.
Abby Adeyemi with a look at your forecast. Well, it's been pretty quiet on the commuter line so far this morning. We haven't received any calls, no tips. But again, if you're seeing something out there that might be affecting your drive, your walk, your bus ride, your bike ride, give us a call on the commuter line 204-788-3093. It is 6:40 now, and it is time to check in with Hallie Cottenham and a look at your business report. Well, good morning, Hallie.
Marjorie, I just have to say, when Abby mentioned the word winter, this is what ran through my mind.
I love it.
I know I'm not alone.
Yes, no, absolutely not. So, Hallie, let's start off with what is a big day today. It is Budget Day here in Canada. And, of course, CBC is going to have coverage throughout the day, and we'll parse through it on tomorrow's show, of course. But
for sure.
Broad strokes, what are we expecting from this budget?
Yeah, some sort of cocktail of sacrifice and investment. We're hearing about tens of billions in cuts to government programs, but lots of red ink too, with some economists predicting the deficit, Marjorie, will be in the range of $80 to $100 billion. We're hearing about generational investments to help pivot the economy away from relying on the U.S. And on that front, BC's Premier David Eby has changed his mind about running anti-tariff ads in the U.S. to draw attention to the softwood lumber tariffs. This after federal ministers came out to the Emergency Softwood Lumber Summit promising support for that industry.
I knew that it was a source of anxiety for many people, including potentially the federal government, given the reaction to the Ontario tariffs. One of my commitments to the federal government was that if they came to the table with us, if they sat with us, that we would work with them on communications, on strategy, on how to support the sector and how to move forward.
So a big difference between Premier Eby and Premier Doug Ford, who, by the way, admitted yesterday that the Prime Minister called him several times, or a couple of times specifically, while Carney was on his trip to Asia to ask Ford to pull the ad campaign. And just one other note in the trade file, the feds have started a dispute resolution process. This over Stellantis' decision to send production of the Jeep Compass from a plant in Brampton to one in Illinois.
And I'm sure a lot of people are going to be watching that very closely. Hallie, experts are warning south of the border of something called a K-shaped economy. What is that, and why the concern?
Yeah, this is about the growing division between rich and poor, with the wealthiest consumers doing well and spending, riding the stock market, seeing their homes rise in value, while lower and middle income families struggling, and scrimping and dealing with faltering job market and high interest rates and rising prices. And if you take that consumer data and you plot it on a graph, it looks like the printed letter K with if you can picture writing the letter K in print, the second and third strokes representing the rich rising and the poor following. It's kind of a visual thing, but I hope you're with me. So some examples. In September, for the first time, the average cost of a new car in the U.S. passed the $50,000 mark. At the same time, repossession rates were up 12%. That's according to analysis by the Wall Street Journal. Coca-Cola says sales of its premium brand Smartwater are way up, but demand for actual Coke is up at dollar stores, okay? McDonald's CEO says the two-tier economy, which is sort of another way of saying K-shaped economy, was why it revived its extra value meal combos after, quote, traffic for lower-income consumers was down double digits. So we know tariffs are pushing prices higher in the U.S. We've spoken about that. But some economists say higher income shoppers have become virtually price insensitive. So you or I might see butter for $8 a pound. We're like, no, we don't need butter this week. But folks who are in those upper tiers are going to buy it no matter how much it costs. In fact, Moody's saying the top 10% of earners in the U.S. now account for about half of all consumer spending.
And I can actually picture that, Kay. I can see what you're talking about, the one going up and the one going down. Absolutely. Okay, I'm not quite over the heartbreak. So we're going to talk about baseball. Finally, you have some last bit of business here about the World Series.
Marjorie, that's why I had this sound effect all queued up.
That sounds like my heart, every day since the World Series came to an end.
So, yeah, you and I both. But here's the thing. A lot of people watched. More than 18.5 million Canadians, or nearly 45% of the entire country's population, watched some or all of Game 7. Eyeballs peaked at 14 million when Ernie Clement came up to bat with the bases loaded, 2 outs in the bottom of the ninth. It was the second most watched English language broadcast on record. Any guesses as to what might the first place broadcast be?
Okay. Does it have to do with the Olympics? A gold medal game, perhaps?
Yes, you got it. This is the OT game, 2010 Winter Olympics, Vancouver. Sidney Crosby scored the OT winner. If not for that Game 7 with the Blue Jays would have taken the prize. Taking a look at it from a U.S. perspective, Fox says Game 7 pulled in nearly 26 million viewers, which is the most since 2017. I had to Google that up. That's when the Astros beat the Dodgers
Hello.
in 7 games. And
Hi, good
the sad
morning.
trombone sound effect. Dodgers, the first
Really
team in
good.
a
I
quarter
remember people
century
used to
to
make
win
jokes
back-to-back
about
titles.
Cheney saying he didn't have a
Pundits,
heart.
sports pundits, and others have declared this year's
Meantime,
Fall
he had,
Classic
like,
as
5
one of the
heart
greatest ever
He
World
did.
Series.
Yeah.
Cold
And then
comfort
Bionic won it
to
too.
Jays fans.
I am a little disappointed in myself. I did not match.
Hopefully things might be different next season. We have a summer, a winter to kind of get over this, hopefully. Repair our hearts, heal our hearts. I don't know, Hallie. It's going to be tough to get over, of course.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
Now I'm worried about Bo Bichette looking for a big payday somewhere else. I don't know.
Yes.
I'm sure your sports guy will have more to say about that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Hallie.
Take care.
That is Hallie Cottenham with your business news. It is 6:46, and as you've been hearing, today is a big day. It is federal budget day, the government's first fiscal update in almost a year, and it's the first time that Prime Minister Mark Carney has signed off an economic plan for the country since forming government earlier this spring. The stakes are high. Not only is Carney under pressure to right the slumping fiscal picture, but he will also face a confidence vote. It's still unclear if the minority government Liberals have drummed up the support needed to survive a vote and avoid a Christmas election. Here's interim NDP leader Don Davies being asked by reporters about the budget ahead of question period in Ottawa yesterday.
Have you been asked by the Conservatives or any other party to vote a certain way?
No.
Is an election a good idea?
I don't think Canadians want an election, that's for sure. And my own view is I don't think Canada needs an election right now. That's why I've said it's up to Mr. Carney. I mean, he has to draft a budget as a Prime Minister in a minority parliament that earns the support of one other party. And that's his job. You know, it's not my job. I don't hold the pen. I'm not the government. It's up to him to craft that budget, and we've been very clear about the kinds of things that would have to be in that budget to earn our support. So do we want an election? No. Do we need one? No. It's up to Mr. Carney whether we have one or not.
Have you talked to him since that pre-budget meeting you had a couple weeks ago?
No, I've only had the one meeting.
The NDP has faced a lot of criticism in the past for propping up the Liberal government. Where are you at with that? Is that something you're on with this on the table moving forward?
Well, I've always rejected the concept of propping up anybody. We signed a confidence supply agreement that brought 9 million Canadians dental care, and we got universal pharmacare established and anti-scab legislation. There's no propping anything up. We extracted things from the government in exchange for our votes. That's how we have Medicare in this country. Did we prop up the Pearson government to get Medicare, or did New Democrats use our power in that parliament to secure good benefits for Canadians? So I'm not worried about any propping up anything. This is a new parliament. It's a new government. And working people are really suffering in this country. You know, prices are sky high. Unemployment's at 10-year records. 1 in 6 young people is not working. Our economy is sluggish, if not in recession, and we face serious threats from south of the border. So there's serious issues facing the country, and we want to work constructively and positively in this parliament. We'll support things we support, we'll oppose things we don't, and the rest of that is up to Mr. Carney.
That was interim NDP leader Don Davies speaking on Parliament Hill yesterday. And we're going to get to Ryan Tumulty here shortly to talk a little bit more about the budget. So stay tuned for that.
At the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, Canadians pause to reflect and remember for those who served, for those who fought, for those who died, and for those who returned home. On November 11th, live from the National War Memorial in Ottawa, join CBC News for special coverage of the Remembrance Day ceremony on CBC and local streaming channels.
6:49 now, 1 degree in Winnipeg and partly cloudy. And as you've been hearing in the news today, later today, Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne will stand in the House of Commons to deliver his first federal budget. It is also a first for Prime Minister Mark Carney. The Finance Minister says he will deliver generational investments. And in a minority parliament, the stakes are high, with the possibility of a federal election being triggered. For more, we have reached out to Ryan Tumulty. He is a political reporter with the Toronto Star and joins us now via Zoom. Good morning, rather. Welcome to the show, Ryan.
Hi there.
What will you be looking for when the budget is released later today?
Yeah, a budget is a very concrete document for a government. And we've heard the government talk a lot about its vision. The Mark Carney has been talking about way back since the Liberal leadership race about spending less to invest more and making generational investments. And we don't yet know what that means exactly. So we'll get a sense of that today. We'll find out, does spend less mean a lot of job cuts? Or does it just mean, phasing people out through attrition? Those sorts of questions are going to be answered today. And that's certainly what I'll be looking for.
You touched a little bit on what we can expect from this budget. Of course, some of the details have been coming out, have been trickling out. But what are some of the highlights that have already been offered up already by the finance minister and his cabinet colleagues over the past few weeks?
Yeah, interestingly, we haven't seen a lot from this government in the past few weeks. I think we're going to see a lot of it today. But, in contrast to the last Trudeau budgets, most of what was there leaked out well in advance of the actual budget date. This time, we're seeing something different. We're seeing, very few things have come out. There's been some investments in job training and some in gender equality programs and things like that. But overall, I would say, the government isn't really, bringing in a lot before the budget, which makes the stakes of today even higher. You're going to see a lot on the table today.
What are the forces at play here into what's shaping the 2025 federal budget?
Yeah, I think, the big factor, maybe the only factor, is the Trump administration. Obviously they're driving investments in, trade diversification and things like that. The idea of getting us away from the U.S. market, also supporting some of the industries that are being hit right now, steel and aluminum and lumber and autos. There's going to be support for all of them in the budget, we're pretty sure. But even beyond just the trade issue, defense spending, which we expect to be drastically increased in this budget, that is because of pressure from the Trump administration for us to increase our spending. So, there's a lot at play here, and I think that's one of the big issues.
This is a minority Liberal government. They're going to need support from another party in the House of Commons to pass their budget and not trigger an election. Over the last few weeks, we've heard some of their demands with hours to go before. How do you see this debate unfolding in the coming days?
Yeah, I'm not seeing, I'm not seeing anyone really work yet towards a deal. So I think they're going to see the budget and then start the real work of trying to find a deal. Like you said, the opposition parties have all put forward demands. Some of them are quite expensive demands, frankly. Some of them are the kind of programs that I think it would be very difficult for the government to agree to. But the Liberals have not really reached out that much and tried to find a deal. No one in any party seems to want an election. Everyone I've talked to isn't interested in an election. But at the moment, it's a bit like they're all in a car driving towards a cliff, and no one wants to grab the steering wheel to change direction. We'll see what happens in the coming days. The first confidence vote is likely to be Thursday. That could be a big issue. And so I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Of course, Ryan, we know a lot of talk this week is going to be dominated by the federal budget. But what other things are you keeping an eye on here in the House of Commons before they head off on a week-long break on Friday?
Yeah, so, one thing that I am looking for, it will be announced today, actually, as part of the budget. Normally it's separate, but that's the immigration figures, the immigration targets for the years ahead. The government's making the unusual decision to put that into the budget this year, but we'll see how that goes. And then south of the border, completely separate, the Trump administration is facing a Supreme Court challenge on its tariff policy. The court won't issue a decision this week, but I think we're going to be able to get a sense how they feel about the Trump tariffs from the questions they asked during that hearing. And it's possible because many legal scholars think the Trump administration has really overused its powers to impose these tariffs. So it's possible these tariffs will be struck down.
We're going to be keeping a close eye on that for sure. Ryan, thank you so much for joining us this morning on the show.
No problem. Take care.
You too. Ryan Tumulty is a political reporter with the Toronto Star.
Marketing contests are great until they go sideways, like the one to name a BC ferry that sank in an ocean of ridicule, and the department store contest that sent Pitbull packing, or the salacious vote to name an Indiana Civic Center after a politician. Marketing contests on Under the Influence with Terry O'Reilly, Thursday morning at 11:30, 3:30 p.m. in Newfoundland, and on CBC Listen.
4 minutes now to 7 o'clock. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1. I'm Marjorie Dowhouse in for Marcy Marcusa this morning. Let's check in with Heather and a look at your morning headlines. Good morning, Heather.
Government workers will be watching today's federal budget very closely. Ottawa has signaled civil service reductions are on the horizon. Looming cuts come as federal unions are in bargaining. We're going to hear from a labor expert at the University of Manitoba coming up. Some lawyers say recent calls for bail reform in Canada do not address the real problems they see in those courtrooms. Paul Cooper, a senior Manitoba Crown attorney, says the cases prosecutors see in bail courts often involve issues like addiction, mental health, and homelessness, problems which he says bail courts are not set up to handle. So we'll hear about proposed bail reforms coming up in our next local news at 7:30.
Thank you very much, Heather. And speaking of bail reform, as you heard Heather mention there in her headline, stay with us because coming up after 7:30, we're taking a look inside Winnipeg's bail courts. We'll hear more about what goes on inside those courtrooms. Also, we'll hear from a disability advocate who helped create the Accessible Canada Act. More on his new book about the legislation and why Lego was a big part of it. That's coming up at around 7:10. Right now in the city, in Winnipeg, it is partly cloudy. It's 1 degree right now at the Forks, 0 at the airport, light wind out of the southwest at 9. We're on our way to above seasonal temperatures once again. 9 degrees is what we're looking at here in Winnipeg under a mainly cloudy sky. Could see some sunny breaks throughout the day tonight, dipping below the freezing mark to a low of -1, partly cloudy, and then the above seasonal temperatures continue. You heard Abby mention it. We're looking at a high of 6 degrees tomorrow in sunshine. Rain on Thursday and 5 degrees, and then temperatures are going to start to dip. I'm not going to give too much away. I'm going to let Abby break that news to you. So stay tuned for that. No updates in traffic. It's been quiet so far this morning, but we're waiting to hear if you have anything that's affecting your morning commute. Give us a call on the traffic line 204-788-3093. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM in Winnipeg, everywhere on the CBC Listen app, and streaming on CBC Manitoba's YouTube channel. I'm Marjorie Dowhouse in for Marcy Marcusa this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. We have plenty coming up in the next hour of the show, but stay tuned here to CBC Radio 1. Coming up next here, World Report.
Today on The Current.
For my wife and I, despite our children moving out, our weekly grocery budget seems to be going up.
I'm Pia Chattopadhyay. Food prices are skyrocketing, rising at twice the rate of inflation. The finance minister is promising good news on affordability in today's budget, but will what we eat get cheaper? That's coming up on The Current.
The Current, this morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Former U.S. Vice President Dick Cheney is dead. His family says the 84-year-old died last night from complications due to pneumonia, as well as cardiac and vascular disease. Cheney served under George W. Bush during both of his terms at the White House. The CBC's Willie Lowry joins me now from Washington. And Willie, what can you tell us about this often polarizing politician?
Well, Dick Cheney leaves a complicated legacy, but one that is perhaps unmatched in Washington. He's widely regarded as one of, if not the most powerful vice presidents in U.S. history. He helped to steer the country in the aftermath of the September 11th terror attacks, and he was a major proponent of the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. But he also defended his administration's decision to go into Iraq despite no weapons of mass destruction ever being found.
And the suggestion that's been made by some U.S. senators that the President of the United States or any member of this administration purposely misled the American people on pre-war intelligence is one of the most dishonest and reprehensible charges ever aired in this city.
His legacy, though, is not defined solely to the vice presidency. He was chief of staff to President Gerald Ford in the mid-1970s. From 1979 to 1989, he represented Wyoming in the House of Representatives. Under George H.W. Bush, he served as Secretary of Defense. And, of course, from 2001 to 2009, he was the 46th vice president, serving alongside George W. Bush.
What about his life after politics? He still had an impact.
He absolutely did, and in a surprising way. He was a vocal opponent of President Donald Trump. He spoke out against the attempted insurrection on January 6, 2021. Cheney even endorsed Kamala Harris as the Democratic candidate for president during last year's election. But he dies somewhat an outcast from his own party. Republicans essentially cast Cheney and his daughter aside, embracing Donald Trump and the MAGA movement.
Thank you, Willie.
My pleasure.
The CBC's Willie Lowry in Washington. For months, Prime Minister Mark Carney has been laying out his vision for Canada's future. Today, we find out how his government is going to pay for it all. Carney has released an ad warning it will not be easy.
We will have to make some difficult choices, responsible choices. Federal government spending has grown massively over the last few years. That's not sustainable.
Carney's Liberal government has also promised today's budget will include money to rearm the Canadian military. But defense experts say so far that promise has been short on specifics. As Murray Brewster tells us, they hope this budget will offer clarity.
I think what we'll be doing in the budget is laying track to meet the 5% target by 2035.
Defense Minister David McGuinty trying to temper expectations about what the Defense Department and Canadians will see today. The Liberal government committed to meeting NATO's 2% of GDP target just in time for the military alliance to boost it to 5%. There have been a number of expensive promises and plans floated around, including replacing the Navy's submarines. Vice Admiral Angus Topshee, the commander of the Navy, suggests we won't see the full price tag for that today.
So I'm not sure when the government will make a decision about the full funding of the submarine program. At this point, we're still working to refine the costs and make sure that we understand what this program will cost. And I would expect that this does fit in within the government's commitment to get to the NATO target of 5%.
Defense expert Dave Perry says the military has a number of equipment plans that the Liberals have talked about for years but never put any money behind. He's hoping to see specifics, not promises.
Not just put the money in the fiscal framework, but actually put it someplace where somebody can actually point to a section in the budget and see the actual financial commitment that is being made, not just words saying we will get there, but actually presenting a forecast of how spending will increase over time.
The big influx of money presents a problem for D&D. It has in the past had trouble spending its entire appropriation. Murray Brewster, CBC News, Ottawa.
Stay tuned to CBC News for special coverage of the federal budget this afternoon. Your World Tonight, Susan Bonner and Catherine Cullen of the House host that coverage. They will have the latest details and analysis of the Carney government's first budget. Join them today, 4 p.m. Eastern on CBC Radio and the CBC Listen app. China says Canada is once again on the list of approved destinations for Chinese tour groups. It is a sign relations between the two countries are thawing, and it could be worth tens of millions of dollars to Canada's tourism industry. The move comes just days after Prime Minister Mark Carney met with President Xi Jinping. Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand says this is a sign both countries want to advance their relationship. The Yukon Party will form the territory's next government. They were the official opposition for nearly a decade. The party and leader Curry Dixon won a majority in yesterday's election. As Gabrielle Planca reports from Whitehorse, voters were clear. They wanted a new direction.
After nearly a decade of Liberal rule, the Yukon swung back to blue last night, voting in a Yukon Party majority government. Premier-elect Curry Dixon says the territory voted for change.
And the good news is that change is here.
The Yukon Party won 14 of the territory's 21 seats, capitalizing on the collapse of the Yukon Liberals. After a change in leadership and retirement of all 7 incumbent ministers, lost all but 1 seat in the Legislative Assembly. And even that seat was won by less than 10 votes, triggering an automatic recount. But Liberal leader Mike Pemberton says the party will recover.
This is a moment that we regroup, we listen, and we rebuild.
The Yukon NDP took the remaining 6 seats.
I'm excited. We're well researched. We listen to people and we will bring their stories forward.
Leader Kate White says her party will push for improved health care as the territory's official opposition. Many new faces will sit in the Legislative Assembly this time around, with less than half of Yukon's MLAs returning from the last session. Gabrielle Blanca, CBC News, Whitehorse.
Voters in some U.S. states go to the polls today. This election day is seen as early tests of Democratic and Republican strategies ahead of next year's congressional midterms. There are 2 gubernatorial races. In New Jersey, U.S. President Donald Trump has endorsed Republican Jack Ciattarelli. It is a chance for the Republicans to turn the traditional blue state red. But Democratic candidate Mikey Sherrill is also getting some high-level support. Senator Cory Booker hyped up a crowd gathered last night.
We are the first state that's going to stand up and say, Donald Trump, you are not the king of America.
A historic vote is happening in Virginia. 2 women there are leading the race for governor. And in California, voters will decide on Proposition 50. It would allow district maps to be redrawn in an effort to improve Democrats' chances at winning some seats. Among the big decisions being made today in the U.S., the mayor of the country's biggest municipality. The polls are now open in New York City. But as Katie Nicholson reports, a record number of people have already cast their ballots.
We stand on the verge of ushering in a new day for our city.
New York City mayoral frontrunner Zohran Mamdani on Monday.
Our time has come, New York. Our time is now.
Mamdani's time in particular appears to have come. The last 4 months, a wild ride from political outsider to ascendant contender, driven by a grassroots campaign and promises to tackle affordability, including government-run grocery stores. And so, former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo entered the race, contrasting himself with Mamdani's democratic socialism.
Socialism didn't work in Cuba. Socialism is not going to work in New York City.
For Cuomo, this race a chance to claw his way back into politics after resigning under a cloud of sexual misconduct allegations in 2021. The other candidates didn't let him forget it.
Andrew Cuomo, my adversary, is like the uncle you don't want to come over on the holidays.
Republican Curtis Sliwa campaigned largely on public safety and as a man of the people.
Like the TV program Everybody Loves Raymond, everybody loves Curtis.
But it was Mamdani who generated headlines and provoked the U.S. president to threaten to pull federal funding from New York should he win.
He's far worse than a socialist.
This race, which could see New York elect its first Muslim mayor, is already making history. More than 735,000 lined up for early in-person voting, more than 4 times the number in the 2021 election. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Washington.
That is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime, cbcnews.ca. If you like the World Report podcast, please follow us and tell a friend. It helps spread the word. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM in Winnipeg. Everywhere on the CBC Listen app and streaming on CBC Manitoba's YouTube channel. I'm Marjorie Dowhouse in for Marcy Marcusa this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Coming up on this hour of the show, it was just a few years ago. The house lights were down and the seats were empty for performing arts groups. So coming up after 7:30, we will hear from the Royal Manitoba Theatre Centre about their post-pandemic recovery. Also, we're taking a closer look at what goes on in Winnipeg's bail courts. We'll hear more from one of our reporters about who is being released on bail and who isn't, and why. That's coming up at around 7:50. But first up here this hour, do you know what the Accessible Canada Act is? Maybe you don't, and it's why a disability advocate wrote a book all about it. He'll join us on the show coming up, and we have some copies to give away. But first, at 7:11, with a look at your morning headlines, here now is Heather Wells. Good morning, Heather.
Good morning. Well, a union for thousands of federal workers in Manitoba is bracing for today's federal budget. There's concern significant workforce cuts are coming to the civil service. Last week, Canada's finance minister said the size of the federal workforce was not sustainable. A spokesperson for Manitoba criminal defense lawyers says the premier's latest comments about the justice system are like anonymous posts on the internet. Yesterday, Wap Canoe said people convicted of child porn offenses should be buried under prisons and placed at the mercy of other inmates. Defense lawyer Chris Gamby says this is just the latest concerning comment from the Premier about the justice system. We'll hear more in our next local news coming up at 7:30.
Thank you very much, Heather. Thanks. Heather Wells there with your news headlines from the CBC Manitoba News Center. Well, let's say good morning to the wonderful crew here on Information Radio. May McKillop is our director. Also want to mention, too, that May's standing by here to take any of your commuter tips if you have any. So give her a call. Also, Darren Morash is in control there of our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel feed. Abby Adiemi is, of course, our show tech, but also the one delivering the forecast here on the show. And, Abby, I kind of talked a little bit about the warmer temperatures we're going to see this week, but I'm going to leave it up to you because I foreshadowed this a little bit about what's coming up later in the week. I'm going to leave that news up to you.
So you just want me to deliver the bad news saying, when we get towards the weekend, we're going to get stock below zero. That's what you want me to say.
I'm going to leave that up to you.
And when we're stock below zero, it means snow is on its way. So it means it's time for you to book in the change of your winter tires and try to find a shovel that's under the deck so it doesn't get buried under the snow. Mostly cloudy out there right now. Winnipeg, we're looking at 1 degree. It's -1 at the airport, partly cloudy. We will hold on to this mostly cloudy conditions through the day. We're going to see some light breeze. We warm up to about 9 degrees and then some clear conditions tonight. We drop to -1 and sunny conditions continue tomorrow with highs around 6. Across board, we're seeing -3 in Brandon now. Similar conditions towards Portage. Dauphin is at -3. Gimli seeing -2 at this time. All these regions are getting cloudy conditions, but they will warm up to about 9 degrees later. And the good thing about the south is, if you are a stargazer, tonight is your night. You get to enjoy the moon take its true form. Further north, the powerful influence Thompson, we're looking at -1s in that region and 0 in Churchill at this time. Florida is moving in this afternoon now, and temperatures fall into chilly -12 later today. So it's more like cloudy and cooler and breezy conditions coming our way. We're right now partly cloudy 1.
All right. Thank you very much, Abby.
Thank you.
Abby Adiemi there with a look at your forecast. Well, as I mentioned, it's been a quiet morning so far on the commuter line. Haven't received any calls, no tips, not seeing anything out there that is affecting the morning commute. But of course, we are standing by. May is standing by the phone here. If you have a tip for us on the commuter line, let us know how traffic is in your neck of the woods or as you're heading downtown, or how anything is affecting your walk, your bus ride, your bike ride. 204-788-3093. $7:14 now. In 2019, the Accessible Canada Act was passed. Its purpose is to make Canada barrier-free by January 1st, 2040. According to our next guest, the issue is many Canadians are unaware of it, how it works, and the story behind it. Max Bro is a disability advocate and helped create the Accessible Canada Act. He's released a new book called The Race to the Starting Line. It's what you need to know about the Accessible Canada Act for making a barrier-free society. Max spoke with Marcy Marcusa yesterday.
Good morning, Marcy. Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks for being here. So what went into creating this legislation? How big of a part of your life was this?
I would say it was pretty much my obsession for about 4.5 years. Actually, no, I'm fibbing. It was probably 4 years because we had to write it and then it had to sit down and wait for 6 months. So really, it was 4 years of really intense work.
Yeah.
From the moment the government came in, and the letters were sent out to the ministers, and I was contacted, hey, we want you to be part of the team. This is your role. It was nonstop from that point on.
Why do you think, despite the fact that you, really talked to all kinds of people and had consultation to create the Act for 4 years, why do you think that a lot of Canadians still don't know what this is?
Well, look, I'm going to be straightforward here. The federal government any government is not a great promoter of when they come up with great stuff, right? But the reality is that the day that the bill became a piece of legislation is the exact same day that the Weed Act came out. And, well, I'll be honest with you, the media was all about the Weed Act.
We all covered the cannabis. Yeah.
Yeah. And so to me, the Disability Act was a stepchild of that, and it just got lost.
You have yourself personally lived with spinal muscular atrophy, or SMA. What's your experience been like with accessibility? Was that part of why you dove into this head first and said, yeah, I'm going to give up years of my life to get into this?
No, I just happened to, I come from a family of entrepreneurs. I ran my own kind of business for several years, but it never felt natural to me, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I mentioned in my book, I don't talk too much about myself, but there was a part in here where I have a conversation with my father. And, I was really upset when I was young because the Charter of Rights only mentions people with disabilities by name, but it doesn't tell us what needs to be done. And my father said to me, well, that's your job. And I remember that many, many years later when I came out of university going, what am I going to do with myself? And really fortunate, a buddy of mine, Dean Wellway, said, Rick Henson is doing an anniversary tour. Can you run the Ottawa tour for this? And that started my whole, working in accessibility and politics and that kind of fun stuff.
Mm-hmm. You have prepared an excerpt of the book to read, so we'll let you read part of it now. How about that?
Well, what I want to read is very quickly. I just want to read what my vision is for the act, and I'm going to try to read it as quickly as I can.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
take your time. Yeah.
I have a flight to catch, but I'm not worried. Even though it's winter, the path outside has been cleared of snow. It's easy enough for me to get out of my house and down the sidewalk to the transit station near my house. Fare payment is quick, easy, because all the machines and gates are all comfortable level, and they are all attendants, if they're there, will deal with any of the issues. I take an elevator to the track level, and with comfortable light rail, train takes me right to the airport. Stops are announced clearly, 3 languages, English, French, and sign language, and the screen, and even caption too. Checking in is a breeze. The airline and the airport are expecting me, because of everything has been arranged and communicated and verified well beforehand. Plus, the AI assistant, that's a nice insert, alerts staff that I have checked in and tells them that I need and where I need it. Staff directs me through the security, ensuring that I get to the gate. I don't have to explain anything about my travel needs because this is a standard practice. While waiting in the terminal, I catch a moment on the news and I see overhead something on CBC. The sound isn't there, but it's easily visible through simultaneous translation and signing. Even so, I think, okay, no problem, something I got to look into while I'm on the flight. Boarding is a breeze. My powered wheelchair, and I'm in a powered wheelchair for those folks that are listening, fits perfectly well down the gangway onto the plane because it's been redesigned to incorporate electric wheelchairs. It folds, or I am in a manual wheelchair, and it folds up nicely, and you get to put it in the cabin right beside me. Doesn't this sound like fantasy? It shouldn't. This is a prediction and well on its way to being realized in Canada, believe it or not. As a lot of these ideas are already in development, some of the simpler concepts we are doing already is the rest is up to the futuristic and to the people that are listening to me to achieve. Now, what I want people to understand is what I'm doing here and what this book talks about is all the things that we need to do to achieve this vision I just mentioned. And it can be achieved.
What parts of that are we doing already? And what is still farthest off?
Well,
there's a lot of examples in there.
I think the one that's furthest off, to be straightforward with you, is the planes being redesigned. Like, be honest with you, that's going to be a little bit of a seismic shift. And where are they going to put people with disabilities? Because, airlines and airports, they're not really designed for people with wheelchairs and mobility aids. They're not even designed for people who are blind. So there has to be a real serious rethink there.
And what is happening already that you said some of these things are happening?
Well, there's a lot of discussions happening. In certain countries, they're starting to redesign how a plane should look like. Look, we got to keep in mind, right? There is a few big companies here that are building planes. And so now, instead of just building it outright like they used to, they're actually asking, how can we make it and put people with disabilities in there? And that's my job. My job is to go there and make sure that these discussions are happening.
And the voices are there at the beginning. AI is really interesting. Artificial intelligence, often cited as a tool that actually will be key in improving all kinds of accessibility for those living with invisible disabilities, for those maybe who don't have an audible voice, but also, of course, in all kinds of other, we mentioned assistance and such. What are you considering as the use of AI continues to rise in the future?
Well, AI, I think, is between you and I, or the listeners, I think it's the magic for people with disabilities. All I see from AI is the possibility of eliminating a whackload of different barriers for a whole different kinds of disability subsets. And to the point that I've opened up a company with one of the gentlemen I wrote the AI chapter in this book, which is called For Humanity Canada, to start having conversation with governments and people about ensuring that people with disabilities are part of the process of AI. Because if we're not part of building this, we're going to be forgotten again.
What do you hope that people take away from reading this? I started by asking why we haven't made more progress, why people don't know about the act, but where do we go from here after?
Well, I'm hoping this book starts addressing that particular issue, and I hope that as many people with disabilities that are listening into your show go out and pick up the book. I want to say a few things about the book. The first thing about the book is it's written in a non-academic way. It's written.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, it's like sitting with you.
And so and I want it to be an easy read, right? So for that reason alone, this book is about educating you as the person reading it with a disability or an ally of disabilities to understand what your rights are. Because I think that's where the government failed. It didn't explain, okay, we created this great act, but nobody understands how to use it properly. So this book explains how to use it properly and what you need to do to move forward in your life with a disability and how this hopefully will change your life.
Thanks for being here, Max. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me on board.
That is Max Bro, a disability advocate and author of The Race to the Starting Line. What you need to know about the Accessible Canada Act for making a barrier-free society. He'll be speaking at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights tonight, starting at 6 until 8 p.m., and we have copies of the book to give away. If you'd like a copy of The Race to the Starting Line, email us, win@cbc.ca. Again, that's win@cbc.ca. Our show director, May McKillop, is standing by to get your emails there.
We carry a world of information in our pockets because we want to know. It's news you can trust, delivered when you want and where you want on Canada's News app. Now with CBC Radio 1, local and live. Download the CBC News app for free.
It is 7:24 right now. I do want to mention something that might be affecting your commute today. So there's a traffic alert. Northbound Vaughan Street closure. So all northbound lanes, east side sidewalk of Vaughan Street between York Avenue to St. Mary Avenue will be closed for building construction starting today at 6 a.m. until 3 p.m. All northbound lanes will be open for afternoon rush hours. Again, all northbound lanes, east side sidewalk of Vaughan Street between York and St. Mary Avenue closed for building construction until 3 p.m. This afternoon. If you see something out there, or you know of something that's affecting your commute, give us a call on our commuter line, 204-788-3093. In Winnipeg right now, it is a partly cloudy sky around the freezing mark right now in the city, on our way to a high of 9 degrees and mainly cloudy. We are now going to hear more about your morning sports. Scott Regier joins us now. Well, good morning, Scott.
Hey there, Marjorie.
Big news. The Winnipeg Jets, of course, heading out on a big West Coast trip, but there's some good news. Reinforcement is going to be joining the team.
Yeah, you betcha, as they get set to take on the Kings in L.A., Marjorie. Captain Adam Lowry, he is going to make his season debut. Lowry underwent hip surgery back in May after the Jets were knocked out of the playoffs. There were reports he was originally going to make his season debut in the last game. Lowry, though, says there were no setbacks. It was a matter of listening to his body as well as the medical staff.
Going into the surgery and the recovery timetable that they gave me, this was kind of the target. It just made the most sense. Obviously, I would have loved to play last game, make my return at home, but I think extra few days can only help, and you can't speed it up. You want to push, you want to be back out there as fast as you can, but at the end of the day, you got to listen to your body. You have to just wait, which sometimes is a little easier said than done.
Aiding in that decision, Marjorie, to not push to get back early is the Jets' record. They have, alongside the Habs, the best winning percentage in the league at the moment. So expect Adam Lowry on the third line tonight between Nino Niederreiter and Tanner Pearson. Puck drop Central Time at 8:30.
Great news to have the captain back. Okay, we're going to stay with the ice, Scott, but this time to the pebbled ice. There's a big announcement in curling.
Yeah, the 100th Brier, Marjorie, is going to be held in Saskatoon. The centennial event will take place in 2027 and have significant Indigenous involvement. Chief Mark Arcand is with the Saskatoon Tribal Council.
When we worked with Nolan for the Olympic trials, we tried something different by embracing our First Nations culture. And when we think about the gifts of the star blankets and recognizing when Jennifer said she was going to take that across the ocean to the Olympics, that's true reconciliation, because it's about acknowledging the first peoples of these lands, but also working together. Thank you so much for including the First Nations people, and we wish you all the best.
Arcand referencing the 2021 Olympic trials held in Saskatoon. Each team there was gifted a star blanket, rich with symbolism connected to creation, ancestry, and the natural world. Jennifer Jones took her blanket with her to Beijing, where she skipped Canada at those Olympic Games. The Brier, Canada's national men's bonspiel, is of course held all around the country. This will be the 7th time it will take place in Saskatoon. Only Toronto and Calgary have hosted it more. And if you're wondering about Winnipeg, 5 times the national men's bonspiel has been held in Winnipeg. The last time was 2008. Kevin Martin came out victorious, if I recall.
Yeah, well, it's always great to watch the Brier. So much fun. Scott, finally, we're going to end here with footy, where it was a big day on both sides of the pond.
Yeah, it is. Across it, the clash of the Titans in the European Champions League today. Defending title holders Paris Saint-Germain will host Bayern Munich. These clubs, Marjorie, are currently the top 2 in the 36-team standings. Meanwhile, on this side of the Atlantic...
Tries to play it in behind. What a save. Dane St. Clair stopped what would have been one of the candidates for goal of the season.
Minnesota United keeper Dane St. Clair making one of his many saves this season. Yesterday, Marjorie, the Toronto native St. Clair was named Major League Soccer's Goaltender of the Year. He is thus the second Canadian keeper to ever win that honor. The first was Pat Onstad, who I grew up playing against in Vancouver. He did that about a decade and a half ago. So good job, Dane St. Clair. He's going to be Canada's number 1, it would appear, for the World Cup next summer.
All right. Thank you very much, Scott. Have a good morning.
You too.
That is Scott Regier with your morning sports. We still have plenty coming up here on Information Radio, including this. We're going to take a closer look at what goes on in Winnipeg's bail courts. We'll hear from one of our reporters about who is being released on bail and who isn't and why. Stay tuned for that. Your CBC Local News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it is 1 degree. It's going to be mostly cloudy, still warmer than seasonal, a high today of 9. It is budget day in Canada, and Prime Minister Mark Carney is signaling it will come with big investments and big cuts. He says it's all aimed at transforming the Canadian economy and relying less on the United States. Carney's mantra has been spend less to invest more, and today we find out just what that means. Some federal government workers in Manitoba are on edge as Ottawa signals civil service reductions. Adam King is an assistant professor of labor studies at the University of Manitoba. He says the two biggest unions have strong job security protections in their collective agreements, and that could complicate Carney's reduction plans.
Major issue in this round of bargaining, and it's going to be amplified by their plans to make these various service cuts and workforce reductions. So we may be heading into a period here of significant labor relation tensions.
The Public Service Alliance of Canada represents about 9,000 federal public service workers in Manitoba. Now, CBC Radio will broadcast special coverage of the federal budget today. It all gets going at 3 Central Time on CBC Radio 1 and on the CBC Listen app. A spokesperson for Manitoba criminal defense lawyers says the Premier ought to have more respect for the justice system. Yesterday, Wab Kinew said people convicted of child porn offenses should be buried under prisons and placed at the mercy of other inmates. This in response to a Supreme Court decision about mandatory minimum sentences for certain child porn offenses. Defense lawyer Chris Gamby.
I don't think that's a sensible thing to say, especially for an elected official. It's the kind of thing that I would expect to see when you're looking maybe at an anonymous comment section on the internet somewhere, not in front of the news media from, the most powerful elected official in the province.
Kinew's Supreme Court comments marked the third time he's criticized the justice profession in just over a year. In October 2024, Kinew claimed he expelled lawyer Mark Wasilyu from the NDP caucus because a legal colleague represented Peter Nygaard. Then this October, Kinew criticized a judge over a bail decision. Some lawyers say recent calls for bail reform in Canada do not address the real problems they see in those courtrooms. Paul Cooper is a senior Manitoba Crown attorney. He says the cases prosecutors see in bail courts often involve issues like addiction, mental health, and homelessness. Problems bail courts, he says, just aren't set up to handle.
There simply isn't enough support, I don't believe, in the community to address these issues. And when they come to us, we are even less equipped to deal with it. We deal with it according to law.
The federal government recently proposed sweeping changes to Canada's bail framework designed to make it harder for violent and repeat offenders to be released. You can hear more on this story coming up in this next half hour right here on Information Radio. Preliminary numbers from Manitoba's chief medical examiner show fewer drug-related deaths in the first 6 months of this year compared to the same period in recent years. But leaders in Manitoba's harm reduction community say more supports are needed. Levi Foy is executive director at Sunshine House, which runs the mobile overdose prevention site. Foy wants more services made available, including a supervised consumption site.
That's kind of one of the motivators that gets the team through the day, because people are overworked and they're stressed and they're tired, knowing that, there could be, we don't have to be the only kind of crew out there doing this type of work.
Addictions Minister Bernadette Smith says her government still plans to open a supervised consumption site.
We are working towards opening up our first supervised consumption site here in Winnipeg. It is something that, we know is desperately needed.
In September, the NDP government scrapped its plans to open a supervised consumption site at 200 Disraeli, following stiff opposition from people living in the area. Smith would not say if a new location has been identified. Former U.S. Vice President Dick Cheney has died. Cheney served alongside Republican President George W. Bush for 2 terms between 2001 and 2009, and for decades was a towering political figure in Washington. Following the attacks of 9/11, Cheney oversaw the country's so-called War on Terror and the controversial invasion of Iraq, which he always defended. Here he is 15 years ago on CNN.
I don't think you can make a case that the world would be better off today if Saddam Hussein were still in power.
So no regrets about Iraq?
I think we made exactly the right decisions.
In recent years, Cheney turned away from the Republican Party and was publicly critical of Donald Trump, calling the U.S. president, quote, a coward and a threat to the Republic. Dick Cheney was 84 years old. You can hear more on that story, as well as other national and international news, coming up on World Report at 8. And you can find more Manitoba news at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Heather, stay with us for just 1 second, because we have Abby coming up here with the forecast. And of course, I was asking Abby, how are you taking in these above seasonal temperatures that we continue to see into November? I mean,
so nice.
Yeah. How have you been taking in this weather that we're seeing?
I'm just getting in every walk I can, dodging the flying leaves because the wind's been so strong, but that may not be an issue today.
Yeah, no, the wind is supposed to be lighter, but yeah, the above seasonal temperatures. It's hard to believe that it's November, right? With the temperatures that we're seeing.
Just a gift, really.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Heather.
Thank you.
Heather Wells there with your CBC local news. Abby, looking at a warmer day today here.
I just need to reflect back to Sunday. While the winds was so much,
yeah,
I was that one human being at the park sitting on the bench while the leaves were just sweeping all around me. I was like, I'm just going to enjoy this. I'm not moving.
Yeah, did you have to brace for impact because it was so windy?
I had to hold on to the bench.
Yeah.
But it's calm. It's calm today. It's more like a calm and cloudy Tuesday across the province. We're going to see mild temperatures in the south and cooler conditions up north. The south is going to be staying warmer than normal on the mix of sun and clouds, while the north will see a few flurries and breezy spots here and there. Winnipeg right now, partly cloudy, 1 degree, mostly cloudy through the day with light winds, and we warm up to 9. Similar conditions we're seeing in the Pembina Valley region. However, around Morris, you're seeing 4 degrees there. It's partly cloudy. Also expecting a cloudy day with high near 9 degrees. That should clear tonight, and then you drop to -1. Sunshine on its way tomorrow. Brandon sits at -3 and cloudy at this time. Your high for today would be around 9 degrees. Dauphin, mostly cloudy, -3, warming up to 8 degrees. Gimli's at -2 under light clouds. You should see your high get to about 8 degrees. The Power Flim Flim, we're looking at 1 degree. Some sun already in that part of the province. More like a bright day ahead. Highs will be around 5 degrees. And then you cool off to -4 later tonight. Then some sunshine on its way tomorrow. Thompson, -1 and clear, expecting a mix of sun and clouds today with a slim chance of flurries in the forecast. You warm up to 4 degrees later. Churchill, 1 degree at this time, mostly cloudy. Flurries may move in this afternoon. You're going to notice the strong northwest winds peak up, and that would send your temperatures down to -4, and it goes all the way down to -12 later tonight. So my heart's really out to the folks in Churchill that we get in the first wave of winter. But hold on, Winnipeg, not to worry. You're going to see your -11, -12s over the weekend.
Yeah, it is going to cool off for us to what we should be for this time of year, right?
Yep, we should get there.
Values.
But for now, we're still enjoying the 9 degrees that we're getting.
All right. Thank you very much, Abby. Abby Adiemi there with a look at your forecast. We have a couple of traffic notes now. As I told you earlier, northbound Vaughan Street closure, all northbound lanes, east side sidewalk of Vaughan Street between York Avenue to St. Mary Avenue, closed for building construction till 3 o'clock this afternoon. All northbound lanes will be open for afternoon rush hours. New traffic tip, northbound Lajamodiere approaching Abinogi-Mikina. There is a collision that is blocking the northbound median lane, so you have to keep right to pass. If you are seeing something out there that is affecting your morning commute, of course, give us a call on our commuter line 204-788-3093. It is 7:39 now. Well, 5 years ago, theaters and concert halls were silent. When the pandemic hit, planned performances were halted, but for at least one local arts group, financial recovery is on the horizon. Recently, the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra posted a small surplus for the first time since before the pandemic. Angela Birdsell is the WSO's executive director.
The very first stats out there were 3 to 4 years. And then by 21, 22, Business for the Arts and Nanos Research were saying, you know what, it's going to be more like 6 to 10 years for us to recover. And so what are we at? We're roughly at the 5-6 year mark, and we are seeing that recovery, but we've had to really reinvent what we offer and how we offer it. And so it takes time because arts organizations plan 2 to 3 years in advance. So it takes time for us to shift and pivot and start to appeal to, the new demographic. And they're coming because once they experience it, they get so excited and they want to come back.
Well, we wanted to check in with another local performing arts group, the Royal Manitoba Theatre Centre, to find out how the post-pandemic recovery has been for them. Kelly Thornton is the artistic director of the Royal Manitoba Theatre Centre and joins me now in studio. Good morning. Welcome to the show, Kelly.
Hi, Marjorie. It's great to see you.
When you were planning the first season back after the pandemic, what kind of conversations were happening about how to do that without those guaranteed subscribers?
Yeah, so when we first returned, we realized we'd lost about 3,000 subscribers. So it was a grim time. Obviously that's guaranteed income that we no longer could count on. And so we had what we called the iceberg conversations, where all the senior leadership sat around and the table and had some really hard conversations around cuts, and almost every solution offered the word cut in it. Cut a show out of the main stage season, cut a week out of each run of the main stage, cut the warehouse altogether. And all of these offers were ultimately, they were just depressing. Mm-hmm. And I also felt that our patrons had been displaced already after 2.5 years of the theater being dark. So I really didn't want to displace them anymore. I didn't want to take their long favored seat that they'd been sitting in for 20 years. So I said, I think we need to actually grow our way out of this problem. We're going to face into the wind. And so we used our stabilization fund. We had happily put some investment into the stabilization fund over the years, and also during some of the COVID relief funding was funneled into there. So we made decisions to do a planned deficit season to bounce back, to give the audiences what they know and love about MTC, which is big, bold theater on our stages. So we gave them exactly that. We gave them, big musicals and great comedies and adventure. And over the last 5 years, we have seen them returning in droves. Mm-hmm. And the difference really is that, we lost 3,000 subscribers. We've gained back about half of that, mm-hmm. which is a good news story. We still, use our stabilization fund in terms of investing more money into balancing a budget through the stabilization. But we are seeing a huge amount of single ticket mm-hmm. buyers. We've increased by about 10,000 from 2019 to now. We have a huge amount of singles. So that's just a ratio difference. We have the same amount of bums in seats, as we call it in theater.
Yeah.
But yeah, the number is, it's not all guaranteed income the way that the subscription base was.
I want to talk about, because you touched on this, about giving people productions that they know, big musical productions. One of those calculated risks was Elf, the musical, which is coming soon. And I hear it's an expensive production. Tell me about the risk that you're taking with this and how you're hoping it's going to pay off.
Yeah, Elf is probably the biggest musical we've ever put on the stage. It's huge. It's got just the chorus of kids alone is 10. So it's a giant musical with huge production values. It's a big tap show. If you don't know, everyone knows and loves the movie, but the musical is kind of a golden age musical in many ways. They really drew on that big band sound. So there's big, huge tap numbers, and obviously ridiculous fun. So it's a large cast with a big orchestra, and And we decided to do it because we knew that Winnipeg would embrace it and love it. And the sales, the single ticket sales, the target is higher than we've ever had in terms of a musical, almost double what we usually budget for a musical in terms of our revenue targets. And we're well on track. And it's selling like hotcakes. So anybody out there who's listening and is like, "Oh, I should see Elf," you better get a ticket soon. We've extended also. So we were going to extend up until Christmas, and then the ticket sales are just so hot that we've made the decision to actually extend past Christmas. So it goes to the 28th of December.
Because you've had some success with The Life of Pi,
Yeah.
Elf, and then Murder on the Orient Express. These are well-known titles to people. So how do you see this going? With these big productions, these well-known productions that MTC is going to be putting on.
Yeah, I mean, Life of Pi is extraordinary, and it's doing so well. It's got one more week, so anybody who hasn't seen Life of Pi, I highly recommend it. It closes on Saturday afternoon. And Murder on the Orient Express, I'm directing, which I'm super excited about. There's beautiful design of interior and exterior trains. It's a wonderful show. I think that we usually front end our season with the big titles, and then we put some of the challenging kind of contemporary shows from the international canon on the stage in the back end of the season. But that front end of the season, you see those 15-person shows, 20 people on stage, and big sets. And it's extraordinary. I mean, I think people have literally grown up watching those big shows on the stage. We have a long history of staging extravaganzas. So that's what we're here to do. And certainly the idea of facing into the wind and really looking at what we're here to do and what our mandate and mission is for all Manitobans has kind of returned us to stability. In the end, it was a hard time going through those years, those dark years where we had to shutter, and then to come back and see that we were missing people in our audiences, and then slowly to see them come back has been really, really rewarding for all of us.
Inflation, of course, big, thing on people's minds. Obviously, some people, you talked about making tough decisions, having tough conversations, people of course having those tough conversations about what to spend their money on. How has that been impacting MTC when it comes to inflation? I mean, because obviously you're paying more for productions, and the people also having to figure out what they're gonna buy for and pay for.
Yeah, it is. It's shocking sometimes when you think the prices, the increase in prices. For instance, paint. We paint our sets. We paint all of our sets. Paint has gone up 30%. And, you can't raise your ticket price by 30% out of the gate. So that kind of increase in expenses, that's the question mark for us right now is that, can our growth meet the growth in expenses? So that's the ongoing challenge. I mean, when the Fringe Festival, which MTC also produces, the Winnipeg Fringe Festival, the first year back, I think porta potties were like double the price. So, every industry has increased their prices, and of course that's inflation, and that's the nature of where we are. But we have to just keep doing what we do best and drawing in audiences and increasing single tickets too, because I think the single tickets balance out the subscriptions, and also it's a joyful, fantastic evening out to go to the theater. So
yeah. Well, Kelly, thank you so much for joining us this morning here in studio. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Thanks so much, Marjorie.
Kelly Thornton is Artistic Director for the Royal Manitoba Theatre Centre. 11 minutes now to 8 o'clock. It's been over a week since the federal government announced dozens of targeted changes to Canada's bail and sentencing framework. The new legislation is designed to make bail more difficult to get, especially for repeat and violent offenders. One of our reporters has been spending time in bail courts in Winnipeg to get a better sense of exactly what goes on inside Winnipeg's courtrooms under the current system, including who is being released and who isn't and why. CBC's Caitlin Garlick is here now to tell us more. Good morning, Caitlin.
Good morning.
Tell us more about our bail court here in Winnipeg. Why were you there and what really stood out to you?
So I was there recently for 2 full days of bail court, and it was something that we decided to do in light of some of these recent conversations we've been having about bail reform here in Manitoba and across Canada, and especially concerns about offenders being released from custody and then rearrested for new crimes while they're out. So we wanted to take a look at what is actually happening in these bail courts, what kinds of cases are being heard, and also who's being released and who isn't. So during each hearing that I heard, the accused would appear on screen from custody while lawyers in one of 2 dedicated bail courtrooms argued essentially why they should or shouldn't be released from jail as their charges are dealt with. One thing that really stood out, though, was that most people during these contested hearings were denied bail. Out of 7 hearings that I watched, only 2 people actually were let out. And another thing was how prevalent issues like addiction, mental health, and homelessness were in these hearings. Virtually every case that was heard in these courtrooms had some element of these issues. And that's something that also came up with a defense lawyer I talked to. Reed Soteric works at a law firm here in Winnipeg, and she's in bail court every day trying to get people released. She says most of the cases she sees in those courtrooms are people arrested not for committing new crimes, but for breaching conditions of their release. So often those are things that are not illegal to the average person. So, for example, it's no problem if you or I are out after 10 p.m., but it's different for someone who's maybe been released on a curfew. And once something like that happens, she says it can be really hard for some of those people to try to get out of custody again, and it can mean they may not get the help they need to address the issue that might have brought them there in the first place.
Some of these people are dealing with homelessness and addiction and may not have the resources to put forward a bail plan that really can address the risk that they may pose in the community. If someone comes into custody and wants to go to residential treatment, they're looking at, months to get in. There's probably not a week that goes by that I don't encounter someone who doesn't have an address, that we don't need at least some time to figure out an address. Sometimes we end up just not having any options, and the only thing we can say is that they can be released to a shelter.
It's something I also heard about from a prosecutor with experience in bail courts. Paul Cooper is a senior Crown attorney who teaches courses on bail for other prosecutors. He says bail courts see a lot of those kinds of issues and they just aren't set up to deal with them.
There simply isn't enough support, I don't believe, in the community to address these issues. And when they come to us, we are even less equipped to deal with it. We deal with it according to law. Is this person a menace? Well, then I guess we have to keep them in custody. Are they manageable? Then we can release them. That's really the only options that we have.
And so, Caitlin, can you tell us a bit more about some of the specific cases that you heard in bail court? What kinds of things were people charged with?
Yeah, so those charges really, really varied. So in one case, for example, someone was charged in an attempted robbery that ended in a daytime shooting, but there were also people who were there just for breaching a condition of a court order, like that defense lawyer we just heard from mentioned. In another case, an 18-year-old man with severe fetal alcohol spectrum disorder was accused of stealing a truck, then driving it recklessly in Portage la Prairie, allegedly running drivers off the road. His lawyer proposed community supports for him and an ankle monitor to try to get him released on bail, but the judge said even an ankle bracelet wouldn't address the key problem there, which was the impulse issues caused by his FASD. In a different case I heard, a former legal assistant with a drinking problem was accused of repeatedly violating court orders by consuming alcohol and then repeatedly contacting her mom. Her lawyer argued that what she needed was support, not jail, but she was also denied bail largely because she couldn't confirm the place she'd live if released. There was another case involving a homeless man with mental health issues who was accused of acting aggressively at Winnipeg's Victoria Hospital, not long after he'd tried to go into restricted areas at St. Boniface Hospital. A judge denied him bail too, saying, on the face of it, it's a person in distress causing chaos in a healthcare setting, but in the context of his record, this is a chronic issue. The two people who did get bail in the hearings I watched were both accused of domestic violence. They had firm release plans like living with a family member or staying on a dry reserve to try to help address their risk and make sure they follow the rules.
Caitlin, these lawyers you talk to probably know better than almost anyone what goes on in our bail courts. What are their thoughts on recent changes to the system?
Yeah, so in their view, people's perceptions about bail maybe aren't always aligned with what's actually going on in bail court. Here's how Prosecutor Paul Cooper put it.
When an individual is released from custody and gets re-involved with the system, obviously it creates a lot of blowback, and rightfully so. What we do is guided always by public safety. It is really the only and key aspect of any analysis that we do. And it's not to say that those results don't happen and that outcomes are sometimes questioned, and legitimately so, but the vast majority of what you don't see is stuff that just runs the way that it should. Does it always work? Of course it doesn't, but it works way more often than it doesn't.
And defense lawyer Reed Saterick says she thinks calls for bail reform are missing the real problems.
Which is the addictions, is the homelessness, is a lot of the intergenerational trauma that we see. Instead, we get things like bail reform, where we instead make it more difficult for people to acquire bail. I think it really misses the point, and I think it disadvantages people who have mental health concerns. It disadvantages people who have addictions and people who are homeless or struggling with poverty. And those are people we should be trying to support.
So what do you think could help solve some of the problems that exist in our bail courts?
So what these lawyers told me was one of the biggest challenges they talked about is the amount of cases they see where issues like addictions, homelessness, and mental health play a big role, and where people need help they might not be getting. But another issue they raised is just the sheer volume of cases they deal with overall in bail court. And that's something that we know Manitoba's Crown Attorneys Union has also raised concerns about recently. Prosecutor Paul Cooper says having more specialized resources at the bail level for people dealing with those sorts of issues could help address both problems.
If there were something on the front end that was specifically designed to deal on a release basis with individuals who are marginalized like this, that might go a long way to alleviate not only the volume issues in a standard bail court, but also actually starting to pave the way to help these people not come back into the justice system.
And as for the changes to bail that have been proposed by the federal government, it still remains to be seen what effect they would have if passed by Parliament.
Thank you very much for this, Caitlin.
You're welcome.
CBC's Caitlin Gowerluck. You can read more on this story on our website at cbc.ca/Manitoba. Let's go to Heather Wells now and look at your headlines. Good morning, Heather.
Good morning. A union for thousands of federal workers in Manitoba is bracing for today's federal budget. There is concern significant workforce cuts are coming to the civil service. A spokesperson for Manitoba criminal defense lawyers says the Premier's latest statements about the justice system are like anonymous posts on the internet. Wab Canoe yesterday saying people convicted of child porn offenses should be buried under prisons. Defense lawyer Chris Gamby says this is just the latest concerning comment from the Premier about the justice system. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 8:30.
Thank you very much, Heather. 1 degree right now in Winnipeg, partly cloudy. Traffic note, slow-moving traffic southbound Disraeli Bridge, emergency crews just before Main Street, and we have a collision blocking the northbound median lane. Lajimodi are approaching Abinoji-Mikina. Keep right to pass again. You have a traffic tip, 204-788-3093. Still ahead here on Information Radio. What effect will enforcement have on residents living near homeless encampments in Winnipeg? Our very own Jim Agapito found out. We're going to hear more about that coming up in the next hour. Also, a family trick-or-treating in North Kildonan received an extra special treat in their Halloween bags over the weekend. We're going to tell you what. So stay tuned for that. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM in Winnipeg. Everywhere on the CBC Listen app and streaming on CBC Manitoba's YouTube channel. I'm Marjorie Dowhouse in for Marcy Marcusa this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Stay tuned here to CBC Radio 1. Coming up next here, World Reports.
Today on Q.
I'm Talia Schlanger in for Tom Power. The Canadian artist Rochelle Jordan is known for pushing the boundaries in dance music. Her new album, Through the Wall, is her most critically acclaimed yet. She'll tell you about that new record and how she continues to carve out her own lane in the industry.
Q, this morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app, or wherever you get your podcasts. The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current.
I'm Pia Chattopadhyay. Food prices are skyrocketing, rising at twice the rate of inflation. The finance minister is promising good news on affordability in today's budget, but will what we eat get cheaper? That's coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. It is budget day in Canada, and Prime Minister Mark Carney is signaling it will come with big investments. CBC News has confirmed the budget will include $50 billion over 10 years for local infrastructure funding. It will bankroll housing, transportation, and healthcare facilities. Let's bring in Janice McGregor from our Parliamentary Bureau. And Janice, Carney's mantra has been spend less to invest more. Today, we find out what that means.
Marcia, when François-Philippe Champagne told reporters yesterday that this budget would have no surprises, he must have been referring to the big ticket, as he's deemed them, generational investments that we've been hearing about for months. Because this finance minister has been sitting on a number of secrets, including exactly what he decided after writing his cabinet colleagues last summer and telling them to find $25 billion in spending reductions, way more than the Liberals had campaigned on. A senior Canadian official tells CBC News that tens of billions worth of programming and expenditure cuts have been identified. Mark Carney may have started off the year talking about trimming the bureaucracy through attrition, but that message has migrated in recent weeks as the scale of these spending reductions took shape. Among the programs that are cancelled or expiring, a Justin Trudeau legacy item, the promise to plant 2 billion trees by 2031. This budget will have a climate strategy, but it's not going to feature that anymore. The Prime Minister signalled in his pre-budget speech 2 weeks ago that some things the Liberals have been doing, they campaigned on, perhaps still want to do, aren't possible now. So as we get our hands on this budget, we're going to check for what campaign promises have to be set aside, if not outright abandoned.
Could all of this be leading to a change in Canadian tax rates?
The Prime Minister has signalled an interest in tax reform to improve Canada's competitiveness, but we don't know what that means. Corporate tax changes, more write-offs perhaps for startups or other strategic industries. Will some of this dovetail with climate strategy? In an era of households stressing over affordability, personal or even consumption tax increases have fallen out of political fashion. Any kind of tax increase would be waving a red cape in the face of this opposition Conservative Party in particular. But governments have to pay their bills somehow. And if economic forecasts remained iffy, the only other alternative is a lot more red ink.
Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa. Former U.S. Vice President Dick Cheney has died. Cheney served alongside Republican President George W. Bush for 2 terms between 2001 and 2009. And for decades was a polarizing political figure in Washington. Cheney oversaw the country's so-called war on terror after 9/11. He also led the controversial invasion of Iraq, which he always defended. Here he is speaking to CNN 15 years ago.
I don't think you can make a case that the world would be better off today if Saddam Hussein were still in power.
So no regrets about Iraq?
I think we made exactly the right decisions.
In recent years, Cheney has distanced himself from the Republican Party. He was critical of U.S. President Donald Trump, even going so far as to endorse Democratic candidate Kamala Harris for president during last year's election. Dick Cheney was 84 years old. Israel's former chief military advocate general is in police custody. Yifat Tomer Yerushalami's detention has been extended after an hours-long search by Israeli police. She's being held on suspicion of obstructing justice and breach of trust. The charges relate to a video that allegedly shows the abuse of a Palestinian detainee. The CBC's Crystal Gomansing has more from Jerusalem and a warning. Some of the details are disturbing.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said enormous damage has been done to the state, that the incident in Sde Tayman could be the most severe information blow in Israel's existence. Netanyahu's comments Sunday came after Yifat Tomer Yeroshami, Israel's chief military advocate general, quit her job. In her resignation letter Friday, she said she authorized the release of a video from inside the military base and detention camp. The security camera footage from 2024 showed soldiers taking a prisoner aside and then crowding around while blocking visibility of their actions with riot shields. The prisoner was allegedly beaten and stabbed in the rectum with a sharp object. 5 reservists were charged with aggravated abuse and causing serious bodily harm to the detainee. They've denied the charges and have not been named. A criminal investigation into the leak began last week, leading to Tomer Yeroshami's resignation. Israel's defense minister condemned her actions and accused her of spreading a blood libel against IDF troops. Her arrest has deepened a growing divide inside Israel between the far-right government that accuses her of damaging Israel's reputation on the global stage and those who feel the military needs to be held accountable for any possible war crimes. Crystal Gamansing, CBC News, Jerusalem.
British Columbia's forestry sector is looking to the federal government for a lifeline. It wants support to withstand punishing U.S. tariffs on softwood lumber. The BC government was considering running a new anti-tariff ad in support of the struggling industry, but as Katie DeRosa reports, it is now rethinking that move.
We don't have a lot of time here. We're probably across the country closing in on 2,000 lost jobs.
Derek Nybor, president of the Forest Products Association of Canada, says he wants to see a federal budget that includes support for forestry workers and businesses. It's an industry that's been hammered by the 45% softwood lumber tariffs imposed by the U.S. Prime Minister Mark Carney has warned of a budget that will force Canadians to make sacrifices. Those in BC's forestry sector say they've sacrificed enough. At a Softwood Summit yesterday in Vancouver, BC's Premier says he's now convinced Ottawa has made the industry a priority.
It's larger than the automotive sector, it's larger than aluminum and steel combined, and it deserves to be treated with the seriousness and respect.
David Eby and Federal Minister for Canada-U.S. Trade Dominic LeBlanc committed to a new BC-Ottawa task force to respond to punishing U.S. tariffs on lumber exports.
Softwood lumber continues to be something that we had been raising with the Americans.
Canada's trade talks with the U.S. are currently stalled, a result of U.S. President Donald Trump's furious reaction to Ontario's anti-tariff advertisements. BC was planning to run advertisements of its own, focused on how U.S. tariffs make products more expensive for Americans. That plan is now on pause.
We will not be running the ads.
Eby says any future ads will be developed with Ottawa's blessing. Katie DeRosa, CBC News, Victoria.
Yukoners chose to move on from the status quo. They chose a new path. They chose change.
That is Yukon's Premier-elect Curry Dixon. His Yukon party was handed a majority by voters in yesterday's election and is expected to win 14 of the territory's 21 ridings. The Yukon NDP will become the official opposition. Leader Kate White says she plans to hold the incoming government accountable as residents continue to struggle with affordability and access to health care. After nearly a decade of rule, the Yukon Liberals won just one seat in the Legislative Assembly. Some voters are going to the polls in parts of the U.S. today. New York City votes for a new mayor. New Jersey and Virginia residents will choose a new governor. And California voters will decide whether to adopt Proposition 50. The redistricting plan is expected to set the stage for next year's midterms. Steve Futterman has more.
Even though it's being voted on today, the focus of Prop 50 is next year, specifically next year's U.S. elections for the House of Representatives. Polls give Democrats a good chance to win the House in 2026. If that happens, Donald Trump's legislative agenda would likely come to a halt, leading Trump earlier this year to find ways to hold on to the House.
We have an opportunity in Texas to pick up 5 seats. We are entitled to 5 more seats.
Trump came up with a plan to redraw congressional maps in Republican-friendly states, and in Texas, Republicans went along. They redrew the maps to try to turn Democratic seats into Republican seats. Traditionally, maps are redrawn every 10 years after the U.S. Census. The next time is in 2030. Democrats say Prop 50 is designed to counter what Trump and Republicans are doing now. California Governor Gavin Newsom.
I know they say don't mess with Texas. Well, don't mess with the great Golden State.
Democrats here say normally they would be against a clearly partisan tactic like this, but they insist they can't stand back and let Trump do it in Texas and in other states. Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren.
We need to be able to win next year, and we're not going to be able to do that if we allow President Trump to rig the entire thing.
Prop 50 is designed to have a time limit. After the 2030 elections, the process would go back to its current nonpartisan method. Steve Futterman, CBC News, Los Angeles.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime, cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM in Winnipeg, everywhere on the CBC Listen app and streaming on CBC Manitoba's YouTube channel. I'm Marjorie Dowhouse in for Marcy Marcusa this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Coming up during this hour of the show, will the new enforcement rules around homeless encampments make a difference? We asked Winnipeg residents living near an encampment by Fort Rouge Park. Stay tuned for that. Also, a family trick-or-treating in North Kildonan received an extra special treat in their Halloween bags over the weekend. A gold wedding ring. We're speaking with the woman who found it and about how she managed to return the ring to its rightful owner. Plus, we have all the latest on weather, news, and traffic. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM in Winnipeg. At 8:11 now with a look at your morning headlines. Heather Wells joins me now. Good morning, Heather.
Good morning. Well, some federal government workers are on edge today. It is budget day. Ottawa has signaled civil service reductions are on the horizon. Looming cuts come as federal unions are in bargaining. We're going to hear from a labor expert at the University of Manitoba. Some lawyers say recent calls for bail reform in Canada do not address the real problems they see in those courtrooms. Paul Cooper, a senior Manitoba Crown attorney, says the cases prosecutors see in bail courts often involve issues like addiction, mental health, and homelessness, problems he says bail courts just are not equipped to handle. I'll be back with more Manitoba news coming up at 8:30.
Thank you very much, Heather.
Thank you.
Heather Wells with your CBC local news headlines. Let's say good morning to our amazing crew here working on the show this morning. May McKillop is our show director and actually taking your calls on the commuter line. Going to get to those tips in just a moment. Darren Morash is running our stream on CBC Manitoba's YouTube channel. And Abby Adiyemi, of course, keeping an eye on the forecast and about to deliver some up and down news?
Yeah, I looked outside trying to see if I can find the sun. I know it's out there.
Uh-huh.
It's out there. The sun is already out, but it's just behind the clouds there. It's more like a cloudy Tuesday morning across most of the regions, except for Dauphin enjoying some sunshine at this time, but it is cold out there. We're looking at Nov.4th temperatures expected in the southern part of the province and a few cooler spots up north. We're going to see more like the southern region still enjoying this below seasonal of us getting to 9 degrees like we've been enjoying it like all week, but brace for it. We're going to start seeing the -2s and the -5s and the -11 from Thursday, so prepare for that. Winnipeg right now -2 at the airport, 1 degree in the city. Depending on where you are, you might notice your devices might say -2, some might say 1, but expect mostly cloudy skies through the day with light winds and a high near 9 degrees today. Across board around Morris we're seeing 4 degrees there. Brandon is at -2, Dauphin at -1, and Sunny and Gimli seeing 2 degrees at this time. Further north, around the powerful influence, we're looking at -1, 0, and 1. Wherever you are in that part of the province, that's what you get. -1 in Thompson, cooler but calm. Sunshine will hold for much of the day for that part of the province, and we see highs near 4 or 5 degrees. Up north, around the Hudson Bay coast, we're looking at 1 degree under mostly cloudy skies. Still the wind strong from the northwest there this morning. Temperatures will drop to -4 -4, and then you see -12 later. But Winnipeg right now, 1, and it's partly cloudy outside.
All right. Thank you very much, Abby.
Thanks, Marge.
Abby Adeyemi there with a look at your forecast. Okay, so we have a few traffic tips right now. Thank you so much for everyone who called in. Got a call about slow-moving traffic southbound Disraeli Bridge. Emergency crews blocking the westbound curb lane approaching Logan Avenue. It appears that emergency crews have moved on, but still slow-moving there as traffic tries to get through. Again, that is Disraeli approaching Logan Avenue. Northbound Lajimodiere approaching Abenoji-Mikina. Vehicles not moving. Traffic there moving very slowly. And then Jen called to let us know about a 4-car fender bender in front of the Human Rights Museum. Eastbound York in the left-hand lane. Turn onto Israel Asper Way. No crews on site. Again, if you have something that's affecting your morning commute, give us a call on our commuter line 204-788-3093. 8:15 now. Just want to say congratulations. We had a book giveaway this morning. Max Bro's book, The Race to the Starting Line. Congratulations to Jillian, Sue, and Laura, who each won a book earlier today. Well, we continue our coverage of the City of Winnipeg's new restrictions on homeless encampments, which take effect on November 17th. That's when the city will start enforcing no encampment zones around places like recreational facilities, parks, bridges, and playgrounds. CBC's Jim Agapito went to speak to Osborne Village residents living near the encampment by Fort Rouge Park on River Avenue.
My name is Serena Greasley.
Do you support the city's new rules, which restricts encampments from around parks, recreational facilities, and bridges? Why or why not?
I don't really. I understand kind of where they're coming from. But at the same time, like, homelessness is a major issue right now. There's not a lot of places for people to go. And I think before you put restrictions in place for encampments, you really need to have an alternative option available for people.
Robert.
And your last name?
Chase. Yeah, I do. And why? It's because people leave dirty needles and stuff around, for little kids to pick up and play with. It's not healthy.
Sarah.
We need your last name.
Look, I'm kind of on both sides. Like, as long as they're not, especially in this one, they can go down by the river. No kids are involved, and nobody sees them, nobody's bothered by them. So I don't see why they would stop that.
Where would you like to see some of those people go?
I think we need more shelters in place. Definitely also shelters that are not necessarily, like full clean shelters, because people who necessarily do have addiction problems, they need a place to go as well. You need shelters of various kinds in various places, and those need to be in place prior to encampments being torn down.
Well, they need to have more housing in the city that is affordable for starters. Instead of all these condominiums they're putting up that's to me, it's just not right. There's a lot of us, like I'm a pensioner, we can't afford rent. We're put in housing, we're put in all this other stuff because we can't afford rent. And neither can these people that are, and it's hard for them to get a place because they haven't had a place. It's really screwed up. This whole tenancy stuff is just not right. And they should have a limit on how much rent you have to pay.
How strict do you think the city should be in enforcing these new bylaws?
I think they should be pretty strict, They have to be, because you can't even walk around the city and stuff anymore like you used to, without getting robbed, knifed, or anything,
Personally, I would prefer if they're pretty lenient on it. Winter is coming, people need places to stay, and at the end of the day, in most cases, they're not harming anybody. They're just trying to find a place to live.
I don't think they should do them at all. I think they're stupid. They should work about other stuff, finding places, putting the prices down on housing. Pretty soon there's going to be a lot more people on the street because we can't afford rent.
And what would you say to a homeless person who feels like the city is prioritizing the comfort of homeowners and renters over the safety and security of people who are homeless?
People sort of bring it on themselves. There's places to rent out there and stuff, but when people get into them, they make a mess, partying, drugging, you know.
And since you're a resident of this area, you know, have you seen this firsthand and whatnot?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, they used to hang in the park here and down over the bank and camping and, you know, it's just make a dirty mess, you know. If they would clean up after themselves and stuff like that, more garbage cans down there or whatever, like, you know, maybe it wouldn't be so bad. You know, like I feel sorry for them, you know, but what can you do?
I'm not sure what I would say to them because I definitely think that in many cases they're right. That is seeming, oh, I'm so sorry, that's my dog. That does seem like the city is doing that. And, you know, people without homes, they are equally citizens here, people as well. They need a place to stay. And just because, you know, everyone here has homes or whatever, it doesn't mean that necessarily we should be prioritized over people who don't. Those are vulnerable people who are struggling in and of themselves, and we shouldn't be making it harder for them.
It's true what they're saying because I've been homeless. I was homeless when I was 50. I was homeless when I was 60. And a lot of this, when you're homeless, they just look at you in a different way. These people are just trying to survive, just like all of us. And I just don't think that they're doing enough. You know, the politics on this crop is so bad that there's so many steps you have to go through and you get nowhere because they want to keep you in a certain spot. They don't want to help you get above that. To get training, to get it, no, they stop you down there and they try to keep you there. And that's why a lot of them don't even want to deal with any of it. They want to be off the grid, they just want to stay left alone.
That is CBC's Jim Agapito speaking to Sarah Baker. Before that, you heard from Serena Greasley and Robert Chase. All three are Osborne Village residents living near the Fort Rouge Park encampment in Winnipeg. Of course, this is in light of the City of Winnipeg's new restrictions on homeless encampments, which will take effect on November 17th. 8:21 now. Just want to mention a new traffic note that we just received here. Stalled vehicle in the median lane on northbound Osborne at the intersection of Jubilee. Again, a stalled vehicle in the median lane on northbound Osborne at the intersection of Jubilee. If you have a commuter tip, a traffic tip, give us a call, 204-788-3093. A Winnipeg woman was surprised over the weekend after discovering a gold wedding band in her children's Halloween bags. Simone Hildebrandt Thiessen was trick-or-treating with her kids in North Kildonan on Friday night. The next morning, she was surprised to learn that what she thought may have been a toy for her kids was actually a wedding ring that had slipped in their bag while they were receiving candy. She joins us now via Zoom to tell us about how she tracked down the rightful owner. Well, good morning. Welcome to the show, Simone.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so take me back. A Halloween night. What happened?
So we were trick-or-treating in the neighborhood, just going around on the streets near our home. The kids had a lot of fun, you know, as you do on Halloween, and came home. And the next day we poured out all the candy to say, you know, what's the haul? What did we get? And we found this ring. You know, we were really surprised. It's not what you expected. And obviously we're concerned, you know, somebody lost this. This is important and precious to somebody. And what do we do? How could we get this back?
Mm-hmm. Describe to me, what did the ring look like?
So it was a simple gold wedding band. It looked like it belonged to a man, and it looked old. It looked like it had been well used and loved. And so, you know, all wedding bands carry a lot of sentimental value to people. I think the fact that it was a little bit older also made me really want to get it back to the owner, because this was something that had represented years of a marriage. Mm-hmm. So trying to think, what could we do? I know there's a neighborhood Facebook group, and so I thought, well, a basic thing, I can make a post and say, if you think it's yours and if you live on one of these streets that we had trick-or-treated on, message me and let me know what it looks like.
You go through the candy, you find this ring, and you understand the sentimental value of it. I mean, what was running through your mind when you found this? What were the kids saying?
They were surprised. I think they were a little less interested than my husband and I. They were like, "Oh, it's a ring. What are you caring about, Mom?" We're like, "No, this is important. This is precious to somebody." You know, we know that rings can slide off fingers. but we only could have assumed like this was by accident. It's not. It was clear that this wasn't a toy, and we're like, this is something we need to try to return.
So you find the ring and you decide that, okay, you're going to put up a post on social media. So what did you hear? What did people say to you when you put that post up?
Yeah, I had lots of reactions, lots of people commenting and saying, I hope you find the owner. Thank you for trying to find the owner. Thank you for not keeping it and wanting to be, do the good thing, the right thing. I was really a little overwhelmed by the response. So many people commenting and sharing and liking the post. And then within a few hours, actually, I got a message from a woman saying, I think this is my brother's. And he lives on this street, which was just around the corner from our home. And yeah, and her description checked out with the ring.
So you get a message from someone who knows who the ring belongs to. And what do you do next? You get it to the rightful owner. Tell us more about reuniting the ring with the owner.
Yeah, so I texted then with the owner, with her brother. And he right away also described the ring and identified his address. And said, yes, we would love the ring to come back. And then we were able to quickly arrange a time and on Sunday afternoon, dropped it off. My husband actually dropped it off with our daughter and said that the owner was just really, really grateful. And, had realized that the ring had been lost at some point in the evening, but then didn't know what to do. You don't really have a recourse. You can't run down the street and call after kids. Hey, did you get a ring in your bag? They weren't sure what to do. And so they were really grateful that we were able to find them and give it back so quickly.
And did you learn at all how the ring ended up in the bag?
I think it was just a matter of, our fingers change as we age and it's cold out there on Halloween. So, you're going in and out of the warm and the cold, and rings just then can sometimes slide off when your hands get a little chilly. I think it was purely an accident. He didn't notice, and it just slid off his finger as he dropped candy into a bag.
Mm-hmm. And how does it feel now to know that you were able to return the ring back to him?
I'm really grateful. As much as you say, we're going to make a post, we're going to try to find the owner, there's always the chance that it won't work, that you're not going to find the right connection of people. And I think it's really important to do the good that's in front of us. And I was really happy that we could return it. And that it's able to go back to the owner and represent the commitment and their marriage.
Well, Simone, it's such a lovely story. I really do appreciate you joining us on the show this morning to share it. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thanks for featuring this. It's been nice to see how excited people are about a small good news story.
Absolutely good news. Thank you again. That is Simone Hildebrandt-Thiessen, who lives in North Kildonan. That's where she was trick-or-treating with her kids on Friday night before they found a wedding ring in their Halloween bags and were able to reunite it with its owner. It is 8:27 now. Well, the Manitoba indie pop duo Sunday Club released their debut EP, Bannatyne, over the weekend. The title track, Bannatyne, is a love letter to the Exchange District here in Winnipeg, the city that shaped their sound. Here is the title track from the EP. This is Bannatyne.
Cinematic sights.
That is Sunday Club with Bannatyne. Well, I do want to mention that coming up during Radio Noon today, during our call-in segment, I think Abby should join in on this call-in segment. Is it too early to buy Christmas stuff? You may have noticed that some Christmas items were already out for sale and on display in October, before Halloween, even before Remembrance Day. So how early is too early for Christmas? Give us a call after 12:30 on Radio Noon. If you can't join the show, you can always leave a message on our listener line 204-788-3797 or email us at radnoonw@cbc.ca. I think we're going to get Abby to join us in on this conversation. Stay with us. Your CBC Local News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, it's 1 degree. It's going to be a beautiful November day in Winnipeg, becoming mostly cloudy and warmer than seasonal, a high today of 9. The Liberal government tables its first budget today under Prime Minister Mark Carney.
We will have to make some difficult choices, responsible choices. Federal government spending has grown massively over the last few years. That's not sustainable.
Carney in a Liberal ad hinting spending cuts are on the way, along with what the Liberals call generational investments in housing and infrastructure. In recent weeks, opposition Conservatives, the Bloc and NDP have all been accusing the Liberals of looking to trigger an election. The House vote on the budget is a confidence vote, meaning if it doesn't get through, the Liberal minority would fall and an election would follow. Now, the union for thousands of federal workers in Manitoba is bracing for this budget today. Concern of significant workforce cuts. Last week, Canada's finance minister said the size of the federal workforce was not sustainable. The Public Service Alliance of Canada represents about 9,000 of the 13,000 federal public service workers in this province. Marianne Ledoux is the union's executive vice president for the Prairies.
Sometimes people think of public service workers as a bunch of bureaucrats with no face. But when you need them, you expect them to be there. And that is our biggest concern.
Adam King, a University of Manitoba labor expert, says the timing of any cuts to the civil service could plunge Canada into significant labor relation tensions. Now, CBC Radio will broadcast special coverage of today's federal budget. It all gets going at 3 o'clock Central on CBC Radio 1 and on the CBC Listen app. We will learn this morning about the new strategy to boost tourism and economic growth in Winnipeg. This hour, Winnipeg Economic Development and Tourism is holding its first event under Winnipeg Forward 2025. It aims to boost competitiveness by developing Winnipeg into one of the country's most investment-ready and economically vibrant cities. It says it wants to create a city that will thrive no matter what the disruption may come. It also says it will work to elevate Winnipeg's global profile and bring the city's business and tourism sectors together to drive prosperity. A spokesperson for Manitoba criminal defense lawyers says the Premier's latest statements about the justice system are like anonymous posts on the internet. Yesterday, Wab Kinew said people convicted of child porn offenses should be buried under prisons and placed at the mercy of other inmates. This in response to a Supreme Court decision about mandatory minimum sentences for certain child porn offenses. Defense lawyer Chris Gamby says this is just the latest concerning comment from the Premier about the justice system.
It would be good for the Premier to have a bit more respect for the rule of law and for the court system.
In October 2024, Kinew claimed he expelled lawyer Mark Wasilyu from the NDP caucus because a legal colleague of his represented Peter Nygaard. And then just last month, the Premier criticized a judge over a bail decision. Some lawyers say recent calls for bail reform in Canada do not address the real problems they see in those courtrooms. Reid Satarik is a Winnipeg defense lawyer. She worries recent calls for change to the bail system would make it even harder to be released for people who are already struggling.
It disadvantages people who have mental health concerns, it disadvantages people who have addictions, and people who are homeless or struggling with poverty, and those are people we should be trying to support.
The federal government recently proposed sweeping changes to Canada's bail framework designed to make it harder for violent and repeat offenders to be released. Preliminary numbers from Manitoba's chief medical examiner show fewer drug-related deaths in the first 6 months of this year compared to the same time period of recent years. But leaders in Manitoba's harm reduction community say more supports are needed. Levi Foy is executive director at Sunshine House. It runs the mobile overdose prevention site. Foy wants more services to be made available, including a supervised consumption site, which the NDP government has promised.
That's kind of one of the motivators that gets the team through the day, because people are overworked and they're stressed and they're tired, knowing that, there could be... We don't have to be the only kind of crew out there doing this type of work.
The examiner's office says the short-term decline in drug-related deaths is encouraging, adding they are cautiously optimistic. You can find more news updated throughout your day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you so much, Heather.
Thank you.
Heather Wells with your CBC local news. A couple of traffic notes want to mention here. Stalled vehicle in the median lane on northbound Osborne at the intersection of Jubilee. And a 4-car fender bender. We got a tip here about it in front of the Human Rights Museum on eastbound York in the left-hand lane. Turn onto Israel Asper Way. So just a couple of things again on Osborne and near the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. Let's get one last look at your forecast. And Abby, hey Abby.
Hi, Marge. It's going to be cloudy today. Fall temperatures in the south. We're going to see mild conditions and cooler conditions in the north. Winnipeg, we are going to get to 9 degrees today. And the northern part of the province will see highs near 5 degrees. Right now, it's 1 and it's cloudy outside.
All right. Thank you very much, Abby.
Thank you.
I want to take this time to acknowledge the wonderful people who have worked on the show today. Our associate producer, Sierra Sanders, Shannalee Vidal, Geneva Dosso, and Jim Agapito. Our news team, Heather Wells and Megan Ketchison. Our YouTube producers, Darren Morash. Our technician, and of course, keeping an eye on your forecast, Abby Adiyemi. Our show director is May McKillop. Nellie Gonzalez is the show producer of the Current Affairs Unit, and Leif Larson is the senior producer of audio. I'm Marjorie Dowhouse in for Marcy Marcusa this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. It was an absolute pleasure being with you here this morning. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. Stay tuned here to CBC Radio 1. Coming up next, The Current. Have a good one.